Good afternoon, I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome back to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly, Stem Cell Research and Therapy. Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Perry Christie, preparing to wrap up that debate. Members have some extra work to do as well. They have about 3 or 4 bills in committee. A couple of those bills they want to take out of committee, and so we'll see what they're able to get to this afternoon. But Prime Minister Christie wrapping up that debate after this morning's session, in which the Member of Parliament for Kalani, Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Hubert Minnis, was named and suspended for 2 sittings of the House. Let's join them in the House of Assembly.
Good afternoon, honourable members. Welcome back from a brief lunch recess. When we suspended our proceedings, we were debating by second reading and committal the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill. And the Chair is certainly prepared to entertain our next presenter. As many.
Thank you very much.
The Chair recognizes the Right Honourable Member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just before lunch, I spoke really in summation of what I intended to speak in more detail of, but I thought, given the fact that we are in a very important period in the life of the Commonwealth that is always symbolized by the celebration of Emancipation Day in Fox Hill, that for the last 12 or 14 years I have been going to Fox Hill with the Member of Parliament to celebrate Fox Hill Day, and we have tried to take with us a number of persons. But during one of those occasions, I challenged the member for Fox Hill to do a formal lecture on Fox Hill and the history of the Fox Hill celebration. And that lecture is taking place this evening at the historic Moncari Baptist Church in Fox Hill, where I propose to be in attendance. Because all too often in the mix of national development and the priorities that arise out of issues that confront us in our democracy, we miss those elements that are significant components in nation building, and that is being able to remind people of the journey that they have been on over the centuries in the Bahamas, leading through the emancipation of slavery, I think, in 1834, and the slave trade in 1838, and majority rule in 1967, and independence in 1973. We miss significant components that should serve to be recorded to remind those who would teach in the classrooms and those who would be taught of their history. And so tonight is a night that I invite those who hear me to be present and to be a part of this historic lecture that will be given by the Honourable Member for Fox Hill. And it's a live broadcast from Moncari Baptist Church at 8:30 p.m. Mr. Speaker, I hope you will be there. Mr. Speaker, I have the pleasure of being the final speaker in this debate on Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013. The proposed legislation is a part of my government's plans to create new financial and economic products which will lead to the strengthening of the Bahamian economy, but at the same time engaged in an element of research that will have worldwide meaning and implications, and so that we could bring it right to the level of the ordinary man. Those of us who have the experience of having special children, and I remind the House of the intervention of the member for Grand Bahama, the minister for Grand Bahama, and member for Pine Ridge, when he spoke emotionally about receiving information from the now infamous Peter Nygaard, made infamous by this speech, by this debate, about where he could source information with respect to his child who suffers or who is who has autism. And I don't know, Mr. Speaker, of any circumstance in this life where parents who have a child or children, where there is the mere possibility of some relief, that they're going to concern themselves about the politics of the occasion in this country, where people decide that they're going to draw a red herring using dirty chalk on the board to take away from the meaning of what we're doing here, and to cause people to focus on their selfish partisan interests of F&M politics. But any father and any mother, and I'm one of them, who watches a child trapped in his body, and you know the child knows enough to know he is trapped in the body, and for people who do not have the means, but yet mothers travel to Cuba, to St. Louis, and now they're going to Panama because of those persons in the research world who have said stem cells could prove to be a relief. And there are cases where parents claim that they have seen an improvement in their child as a result of the therapy. When we commenced work as a new government, we met approvals in place for the Okeanos Heart Institute. The F&M government had granted approval, and the institute, in its fledgling stages, was going through acquisition of equipment and construction of what they proposed to be their clinic, their building, their physical premises. And we were advised they had spent up to $8 million at that time in furtherance of a decision made by the honorable leader of the opposition, as then Minister of Health, on behalf of the then F&M government, to give them the approval sufficient for them to spend that money. The leader of the opposition spoke about the conduct of his predecessor, Dr. Marcus Bethel. And he used as an example against stem cell that Dr. Marcus Bethel caused the closing of a clinic in Grand Bahama because it was operating without regulations and without the usual test of integrity when it came down to therapeutic interventions. He used it as an example. Well, the first point I make this afternoon is Dr. Marcus Bethel was appointed to the cabinet by this Prime Minister. He served with some colleagues here in my government. And ministers do not unilaterally close down clinics. They do so in furtherance of the decision of the government of the Bahamas at the time to do the right thing with respect to the reputation of this country. And let me take you further, sir. As my government desired a reputable jurisdiction, we stopped the work being done by Okeanos pending the establishment of a new legislative regime. And as proposals came in, we advised that all consideration was on hold pending the passage into law of new legislation. There was no rush. Instead, there was a deliberate, considered point of view that the importance of this and what we were doing was sufficiently or manifestly in the best interest of the country that we did not wish to make mistakes. Mr. Speaker, I recall saying to the Minister of Health that let us appoint a task force. Let us put people who we regarded as reputable members of the profession, licensed and approved and certified. And we invited a Dr. Porter to take the chair. Up to that time, as a former Prime Minister, I had seen Dr. Porter and his partner, Condell Brown, and other partners he had in the provision of a cancer treatment center. I had seen them become the only certified center outside of the United States by the American Cancer Association. I had seen them go into jurisdictions in the Caribbean. I had read of discussions they were having with other universities. I'd seen them go into Turks and Caicos, into Antigua, into St. Kitts, where governments were approving them. The leader of the opposition today even extended himself further by suggesting Dr. Porter was a big donor of the PLP in his press out there. And I don't know, Mr. Speaker, who he gave money to. But let me just say this. We saw him at the time as a professional who had headed up McGill University Medical School, who was a member of the Privy Council appointed by the Prime Minister of Canada to be chairman of the National Security Commission of Canada. That's what we saw him as, all for the record. We saw him as an investor who had received permanent residence in the Bahamas. We saw him as someone who his fellow practitioners accepted as someone worthy of support. This government, we do not, Mr. Speaker, knowingly make the wrong decisions. That's not our intention. And I want to be able to tell people at this table that when the issue came up, I reminded my colleagues that I served as a Minister of Health before. I reminded them of a time in the Bahamas when body bags were leaving the Bahamas because people were coming here looking for a last chance to be helped. That people were exploiting them. This Prime Minister, this former Minister of Health, had that experience, and he shared that experience with his colleagues around the cabinet table, saying no matter what the cost and what kind of trouble we put investors to, Our new government must do it right. We will not proceed any further until we put in place rules and regulations that will govern the use of stem cell research and stem cell therapy in the Bahamas. The leader of the opposition decided to take the debate down the wrong road. He argued that the legislation was being passed for the benefit of a particular person living in the West. And I presume he's talking about Peter Nygaard, that's clear. And the proposition seemed to have been fueled by a tape of Nygaard claiming victory and that we won the country back in the presence of some of my colleagues. I believe, Mr. Speaker, I verily believe that the fact that I was not present on that occasion and therefore not on the tape caused them to make a decision to involve me, because you got to get the head. And that this whole affair was because I was not present, I was not there, and they needed to get me. Proposition number one that I want to put here. Mr. Speaker, I have the privilege, I've had the privilege of inviting all of these new young men and young women into public life. I've had the privilege of interviewing them and speaking to them about their future. And I have done so as someone who has spent, next year will make 40 years in public life. 2 years as a senator and the rest as a member of this House. And I've spoken to them about the extraordinary circumstance of the Bahamas, where, as the member for Golden Gate said, there's a double standard. Even the Tribune acknowledged. Yes, Mr. Christie talks about one standard for the other. We have to acknowledge that we have to watch the PLP more than we watch the F&M.
Is that?
Yes, the Tribune and editorial.
Yeah.
And who was watching them for the last 5 years? Yeah.
I make this point so to say this,
When he took the $10,000 from you.
that I have been around long enough to be able to say to my colleagues, we cannot afford to be distracted.
Yes.
That the cost of victory is so incredibly exacting, because you have to recognize the impatience of people who elected you, their inability to accept the time, that we must be given time, and that everything is constantly moving. And that the job of the opposition is to disrupt that, to cause people to think of other things, to create this challenge that Christie is corrupt. Christie ordered the police to prosecute Cole Smith and Freddie Smith. Call me Perry. But I walked into my cabinet and told my colleagues that I resented the fact that a former colleague of mine was charged and no one told me. But yet, I was being placed in a position where, as Prime Minister, a learned QC was saying that I was manipulating the police force in that way. That is total disrespect, Mr. Speaker. Total disrespect. And if left alone, it causes people to have a jaundiced view of us. I want my colleagues to know that in 1992, when the PLP lost, I inherited the office of the person who became Prime Minister. He couldn't clean his office up good enough. So there were papers that were left in place that allowed me to see what was going on. Mr. Speaker, I know who the people are in Lightfoot Key who raises the money for the F&M. I know the people who cause there to be a jaundiced view, a bad view of the PLP. I know who they are. I know who they are. I know who they go to. I know who gives money to them. I've been around long enough to be able to find out in my own way, but also to see the evidence of it. And Mr. Speaker, we're going to have the opportunity to examine the recommendations of the Constitutional Commission. And we're going to have the opportunity to determine for ourselves what kind of Bahamas we want and what recommendations we will accept. But until such time, Mr. Speaker, political donations are lawful. And as I will show you, sir, Peter Nygaard's history in the Bahamas began with a reference from Sir David Knowles and Mr. Peter Johnstone. When the law firm of Higgs and Johnson was acting for him, they recommended him for permanent residence. No, Peter Johnstone, Jeffrey was the lawyer.
Peter was the banker.
But they recommended him as one with great means, and he was there in the UBP orbit. And I will come back to it, Mr. Speaker, because it's important to let you know that once he was in the UBP orbit, all was well. I don't get to know. I once took a delegation out to his house where they were having a party, and I saw the F&M ministers. They were in power. Minister of Tourism, Member of Parliament for West End was with me. And I saw every major investor in the Bahamas there, Sol Kirsten and the rest of them, having fun. Saw all the women, and I tell the fellas, this ain't the place for us to be. Because I always knew what is the place for us to be and what not to be. I told them, let's leave. They're having a party. They're having fun. Once Peter Nygaard called me, and he said, Mr. Christie, I have Robert De Niro coming to the Bahamas. He's a movie star. I would like you to meet him for me because it is difficult for me to come, and I want him to know he's accepted in the Bahamas. Robert De Niro. I didn't go by myself. I called young Gray Davis, the Member of Parliament for Cat Island.
Assignment for BD.
I said, come go with me, please, because we're going to meet Robert De Niro. I always wanted to be Prime Minister, and I was always mindful of the snares and the traps that you could get caught up into. Very cautious. People, I'm always like that. I went out there when the F&M fellas were really enjoying themselves, and I had to stand on the porch. And I remember telling Debbie Bartlett, I don't know if she remembers, Mr. Speaker, do not let me yield to temptation. If you see me yielding, hold my hands. I once said that to her, right out there. And I left. But I do that, Mr. Speaker, with investors over the years. So let me tell you how it began. So Lyndon Pindling turned to me in 1991 and says, Perry, you have been arguing for a long time that we should get to know investors. He said, I want you to meet with certain investors. One is a lawyer, Jeff Johnstone is the lawyer, the next one, Peter Graham, is the lawyer. I want you to meet with them and talk with them. That's how I met Peter Nygaard. That's why I speak so authoritatively. I don't think he could ever say to you, I have asked him to donate to my political campaign. But when he does, I'm pleased because it's lawful. I've always told the press, whether it's about people who, Craig Flowers and I went to school together, from we were children. His brother died, Arnold, and I went to the funeral. We were children together. I don't care what people say about the relationship I have with people. Once I do not cross the line in that relationship, do not have people have the wrong impression about it. But when it comes down to the laws of the Bahamas, confidentiality, I've taken a position, Mr. Speaker, that investors do not want me to say who they have donated to. And let me go further, sir. I have had in writing leading F&M personalities who have donated to the PLP cause and who have told me, I know you will exercise your discretion because I am not a supporter of your party and how you handle this. In one case, a very, very leading one says, because you're a good prime minister, a good man. That's what I say. This is no exaggeration. This is the Bahamas. This is the Bahamas. Do you know the enormity of the decision the member for South Africa made?
Yes, sir.
Do you all recognize that? He speaks in a debate and says he is for stem cells. He knows, Mr. Speaker, that one of the significant areas of research will be the cardiologist. And he is a heart patient. He knows that all of these applications have leading cardiologists, professors from leading universities, Mr. Speaker, and he knows the significance of it. That's why he supported it. And he's at a stage of his life where he cannot face the contradiction of saying yes and then being asked to say no.
That's right.
And I will take you step by step through the process of the application of Okeanos. And I will ask you step by step to tell me what's in the mind of a Minister of Health, a former Minister of Health, who would lead his ministry into making a decision of the kind he made without any regulations, any law, and even the most rudimentary test as to the fitness of an individual to invest in the Bahamas. Not even that. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think the consideration was for that kind of approval? Since he's talking about me, I'm going to ask you, Mr. Speaker, I make as a proposition that the Ministry of Health approve Okeanos with no controls and levels of accountability in place, without the normal security and intelligence clearances, and that the way in which it was done leads to major questions as to why the usual investigations did not take place, and who was the person or persons benefiting from this process. A process that lacked transparency. And this was happening in 2010 and 2011. And even though he says, he puts the date, when I said Nygaard spoke to me, this was before, Mr. Speaker, Nygaard was even on the radar screen. He was dealing with, in 2010, Okeanos. I believe it puts a lie to the proposition that we're passing legislation for one group, when it is so obvious that the FNM gave a huge concession to an unregulated group who were connected to influential FNM professionals, and we needed legislation to regulate their operations in accordance with best practices. But this debate has become a debate over Peter Nygaard and the expressed thought that he donated a lot of money to the PLP, and we in turn will grant him a license to engage in stem cell therapy and research. Mr. Speaker, I believe, and as I've said today, it is ignorance to believe that licenses can be obtained in that way. That I believe it is a level of acute ignorance to believe that a Minister of Health with the reputation of the current Minister and member for North Andros, one whose name is written in the annals of the Clinton Foundation, which is a world foundation, Mr. Speaker, dealing with AIDS. One, when I was presenting his daughter to the bar, I saw that her referee, the person who provided the reference to the State Bar of Maryland, was one William Jefferson Clinton, who was speaking with great familiarity of the work of Dr. Gomez and his family connections. I believe it is a patently stupid assertion that the bill is intentionally drafted to ensure that only the most, that somebody living in the West will do it. When we drafted this bill, as a member for South Eleuthera indicated, the Attorney General was given a brief to look at what was happening in the world. And ultimately we settled on legislation of Canada. And then we had experts in Canada who agreed they would be a part, Mr. Speaker, of the list of experts who would help us in this process. Professors in Canada. Dr. Gomez had a friend who was a professor at the University of Toronto, Professor Stan Reed, who worked in pediatrics here in the Bahamas, who understood the need for the legitimacy that we wanted. As Prime Minister, I had indicated to the Minister of Health that I wanted some institutional support, like from the English Medical Council or the Canadian Medical Council or universities. I knew how important it was. When I was a patient at Johns Hopkins, I spoke to the brightest and the best in connection with the same thing. We have a list here of Professor Stanley Reed, Professor Emeritus, University of Toronto, Consultant in Infectious Diseases, the Hospital for Sick Children. Professor Peter Liu, Professor of Medicine, University of Ottawa, Consultant Cardiologist, Ottawa Heart Institute, Scientific Director, University of Ottawa Health Institute, Member of the Science and Policy Council of the World Heart Federation, Ms. Carol Major, Consultant in Laboratory Policies and Procedures, Ministry of Health, Ontario, Expert in Quality Management and Quality Control, Ms. Jane Munro, Director, Quality Management Program for Laboratory Services, Ministry of Health, Ontario, responsible for accreditation of laboratories in Ontario, including blood and tissue bank. Dr. Indira Martin, Director of HIV/AIDS, Reference Laboratory, Ministry of Health. That is the PhD Dr. Indira Martin, the daughter of the Member of Parliament for Engliston, however that constituency is called, Engliston, who has a PhD in molecular biology, who is clearly, Mr. Speaker, operating at a level that fellow scientists will appreciate. Where the legislation, Mr. Speaker, that we passed so that people understand it, The legislation provides that Bahamians will be exposed to this and trained in this. That the government will be in a position to cause that to take place. And I could keep on saying it. We are about to enter into, Mr. Speaker, an age of enlightenment when it comes down to what this is all about. Our colleagues know, all of us saw, that we were elected to do the right thing in this country, but not to be daunted by big things that we have to do. Mr. Speaker, the adult stem cell market for cellular therapy stands at $3.2 billion in 2013 and is expected to explode to $8.5 billion in 2016. At least 300 million people in the United States, Europe, and Japan could benefit from stem cell therapeutics over the next 10 years. And whilst we do that, Health City Cayman Islands is scheduled to open in late 2013 with a 140-bed tertiary care hospital projected to be a low-cost alternative in cardiac surgery, cardiology, and orthopedics. Over the next 10 years, the hospital is planned to expand to a 2,000-bed facility providing tertiary care in oncology, neurology, and other disciplines. Ascension Health Alliance, the largest private not-for-profit health system in the United States, has invested $2 billion, Mr. Speaker, of its $17 billion in assets in this endeavor. They are creating a Walmart environment to provide the lowest possible cost health care based on the Narayana Health City model in India. Personnel will be recruited from India. The physicians will not be licensed in the United States. That's happening, sir. It's happening. Okay? American World Clinic Barbados. American World Clinic is building a new hospital on the site of the former St. Joseph Hospital in Barbados. The primary target market will be patients from the United States and the United Kingdom. Although Barbadians and other international clients may receive care there as well, the initial hospital facility will provide urologic surgery, orthopedic surgery, bariatric surgery, ENT surgery, general and gynecologic surgery. No, gynecologic. I'm only repeating what I have. Gynecologic. No, I'm saying I only repeating what I have here. Talking about, you know? Okay, gynecologic surgery. They would have me say so. Ophthalmic surgery, dental surgery, plastic surgery, dermatologic treatment, and medical research. Thus, the American hospital is not in direct competition with us to deliver minimally invasive cardiovascular and orthopedic intervention. And so, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying here is that all while we're discussing this, as the minister, as a member of Parliament for Bain and Grandstown said, time doesn't wait on anybody, sir. It's moving, and other countries are moving it. And the question is asked, Mr. Speaker, and I want to do this here. Mr. Speaker, many, many years ago, Freeport was founded. The leader of the opposition, and I wasn't hesitant to say his speech was devoid of scientific merit because he described himself in his opening sentence as a man of science. But he knows, sir, that the most sophisticated process or processes are carried on in Grand Bahama in manufacturing the component of the drug that is used to fight HIV, AIDS. He asked the question that how could we possibly at this time deal with stem cell? Who is the ethicist we have in Parliament or in the Cabinet? Who is the microbiologist we have in Cabinet? Who is the scientist we have in Cabinet? A complete misunderstanding, a lack of comprehension of how Cabinet government works. Mr. Speaker, countless governments have been governing Grand Bahama and watching Syntax to all of the others. watching the petrochemical companies come into being, moving from producing oil, not producing it, but processing it and storing it, with all of the scientific know-how necessary, and we've been able to do that. And he asked the question, how do we administer it? I once had that, and I told you this morning how I dealt with the situation. Mr. Speaker, we are going to administer it based on putting in place the right laws, putting in place the right regulations, Mr. Speaker, and ensuring that we have the people with the capacity, recruited both from here and abroad, who will ensure that we have a regime that will be respected. In addition to which, sir, I said, the very nature of the scientists who are coming in, they will know, sir, that their future is dependent on the authenticity and credibility associated with their work. And so, Mr. Speaker, the legislation is intentionally drafted to ensure that only the most reputable enterprises with outstanding international scientific participants will be licensed to do business in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the bill sets out how the National Stem Cell Ethics Committee is appointed and the care and attention that must be exercised in making the appointments. Someone should point out to the Leader of the Opposition that for many years, Mr. Speaker, we in the Bahamas have had to deal with issues involving great acts of, great challenges for us, Mr. Speaker, and that when it comes to that, we require companies, Mr. Speaker, to provide environmental impact studies. We pay a lot of money to do so, and we ensure, Mr. Speaker, that those studies are dealt with by persons who are qualified Bahamians who constitute the staff of BEST. And so we are constantly having challenges, and we are constantly requiring them to hire the best companies in the world to engage in studies. And Mr. Speaker, in recent times, I've said to the College of the Bahamas, I have said to the University of the West Indies, we cannot continue to empower these companies knowing that we're spending the money and we have potential scientists here in the Bahamas, here in the West Indies, who are able to do the very same work. And it's time that we find a way of dealing with it. And so I was so pleased to see the quality of the people we are recruiting. Young people who finished their PhDs in some science or the other. Engineers who have high levels of academic achievement, that coming back to the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, and we are going to continue. We said in the campaign, we believe in a Bahamas where we could create an environment for our young, qualified people to find a job that they are able to operate here in the Bahamas and operate with dignity. And Mr. Speaker, this same stem cell legislation will provide opportunities for the scientists who are Bahamians to become more actively involved in the work in their country, Mr. Speaker, and research, I think, that will go on to impact, I believe, Mr. Speaker, from here, impact the world. But this debate has become a very personal one, Mr. Speaker. Nasty allegations about the PLP and its members. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that as we call names today in Parliament, that the recommendation from the Constitutional Commission about the manner in which Parliament ought to conduct itself when it comes to the affairs of citizens or residents of the country, that we're going to have an opportunity to look at that and an opportunity to deal with it, Mr. Speaker, so that, in fact, there could be a greater degree of responsibility, and if there isn't, the citizens or the residents will have a right of reply, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I want now to speak to the obvious fight that is going on between Louis Bacon and Peter Nygaard, which has plagued this debate and which has created quite another debate over Clifton. Mr. Speaker, when I told you I met Nygaard, Mr. Nygaard, I met him as the leading fashion designer of Canada, the #1 designer, and rated number 3 or 4 in the United States of America. That was what it was. That he had some of the richest and the famous people of the world come through his place. We know that, we heard that, we saw that. I know that. Nygaard, sir, was joined by a lot of other people, one of whom was a man by the name of Louis Bacon. Louis Bacon is another very wealthy man who was a sponsor of the fight on Clifton, and who, Nygaard and Bacon, became caught in a conflict that did not surface right away, but involved the ministries, the office of the Prime Minister, responsible for lands, the office of the Ministry of Transport, responsible for docks. All of this became a major issue where two multi-millionaires or billionaires were fighting one against the other in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, a long time ago, I was asked to, when Peter Nygaard's mother died, I was asked to come to a service they had at the home on West Bay Street. And when I got there, I met the Member of Parliament for Long Island. And I met her sitting next to the member for Golden Gates. I don't think anything of it, because I just assumed she knew him, because only people who were invited would have come there. It wasn't a general thing. They had asked me to provide a audio or visual recording of my views of his mother and his mother's love for the Bahamas. And one of his sons had come to me to explain this to me, and that I had met her, and they wanted just to, as a part of the memorabilia, to have this recorded. Thereafter, at this service, they had the remains, and they placed the remains on the wall, and I left. I was not a frequent visitor to his home. I was not someone who, by any stretch of the imagination, was looking for comfort around him. I saw him as someone who was a contributor to the Bahamas, and I never thought that I would be called corrupt in connection with him. When we won the government, I met this incredible fight going on between Peter Nygaard and Louis Bacon. And remember now, the references in the files of the government of the Bahamas certifying the integrity and character of Peter Nygaard came from then Mr. Derwent Knowles, who became Sir Derwent Knowles, and Mr. Peter Johnstone, who gave references and certified as to being of sufficient character and integrity and means to be a permanent resident of the Bahamas. Mr. Peter Johnstone said he knew him as a man of considerable means and of the highest integrity. These are Bahamian citizens of great repute who are certifying the integrity of a man. And I'm going to ask you to journey with me to see that he's going to be subjected to the same thing the PLP is subjected to. Yes. As long as he is in the camp, yes, or perceived to be in the camp of the UVP, he's okay. As long as he's perceived to be in the camp and a friend of the FNM, no problem. But the minute he came into the PLP, or perceived that he came into the PLP camp, perceived it, then he's dipped into and painted. And just look at it. When Sir Lyndon asked me to meet him, it was about a donation to some people in South Andros, who I didn't know and I still don't know. But I met this ostentatious man with long hair, who I got to know better as time went on, as a personality in the Bahamas, and who had his business affairs around the world, and whose lifestyle was as such, similar to what you read about Hugh Hefner and those. But that he was licensed around the world, licensed around the world and countries of the world to do business.
The BT syndrome.
And he was licensed in the Bahamas. There are members of the FNM hierarchy who could speak much more intimately than I about Peter Nygaard.
I understood him to say that.
I was amazed to hear the number that he spoke about, because I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, when the member for Golden Gate said he spent as much as $20 million, I just want to tell you I went to the hospital to see Gus Cooper. It was the day before surgery and I was about to go to Trinidad. Gus Cooper is my lifelong friend. Gus Cooper had no insurance. Gus Cooper was one of the iconic contributors to this country. When I came back and found out that the surgeon who did the surgery and left the next day, embedded his skull in his stomach and left the next day for 6 weeks holiday, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand it as a layman, and I still don't understand it. When I came back, his speech was non-existent, and he had paralysis on the right side. I cried. They wanted to airlift him to the United States. Didn't have the means to do so. It was a weekend. And I had already indicated sufficiently to the Bahamian government that if left to it, we would find a way to help. Peter Nygaard has a daughter called Bianca. Not had the pleasure to, I met her publicly when she rushed to Junkanoo, and not had the pleasure to have any real conversation with her. But I was told by Gus's family that she'd asked her father to make an intervention and help Gus to go to Miami. A day passed, and I spoke to the Minister of Health. I asked him to go and check on Gus for me. She did. I told him to make arrangements for me to see how we could get him into hospital in the United States of America. And then I was called and asked by Dr. William Thompson to call Doctors Hospital and hold them off, saying that we're going to find a way to pay. And then if I could speak to Nygaard, whose daughter had asked him to pay. I want you to look at me when I'm saying it. For Gus Cooper, only Jesus could have told me not to do it. But I called NIGAD and I asked him, have they spoken to you about doing this for Gus Cooper? He said, I'm glad you called because I did not want to go and do this by myself. I'm glad that somebody in the government is interested because he desperately needs help. That's what happened. Nobody out there, none of these who talking the talk would have volunteered to help him. I sat next to the minister of the Seventh-day Adventists and I told him, the leader of the opposition, down at the Sheraton Hotel, about Gus. And the fact that I went to see him 2 Sundays ago, where he appeared to lack the will to live. A man who came to me when I lost and said, you don't give up and you don't give in. That we made us sterner stuff. And the people in and around that hospital heard me speak to him for 30 minutes, telling him he doesn't have the right to die, to give in, or to give up. Telling him that he is my leader, and that if he has to go in a wheelchair to Bay Street, he goes as the leader of the Valley Boys. And if he can't lift his arm, he could point with a good one. And if he can't talk, he could still point. But we're not going to give up. We're going to be with you all the way in this one. And when it comes right down to it, you know, it's who stands with you. Who's prepared to stand with you?
That's it, Prime Minister. That's it.
The Tribune asked in an editorial today, when it comes to Perry Christie, and it's a question between Peter Nygaard and the Bahamas, we want to see what he's going to do. You ever hear any nonsense like that? Mr. Speaker, I once went to the Princess Margaret Hospital and I saw Tony Curry, baseball player, in the public ward, and across from him Count Bernardino. I called the then Minister of Health, so that you know the consistency, Dr. Bernard Nottage, then the Member of Parliament, now the Member of Parliament for Bain and Grandstown, and I asked him if we can allow something like this to happen. I'm not talking about favoritism. I'm talking about iconic figures in this country who lifted this country up to the world, who had precedent-setting experiences on behalf of this country, and we allow them to languish and to die.
You did the Yama Bahama too?
Yama Bahama.
You did it the same way?
I did the same thing, sir. Same thing. And I feel strongly about that, sir. And if I have to call Hubert Ingram to say, Hubert, could you do something about this? Mr. Speaker, you think I can let the fact that we don't talk stop me from calling him to bridge a gap between people who need to have treatment, but who, for the lack of money, can't have it?
No, sir.
And who will die?
No, sir. No, sir, not you.
I told Gus Cooper in that Southwest facility out there, I said, my brother, I don't know how we can do it. Politics is insignificant here. This is me and you. This is your childhood friend. I know you want to say something to me, but you can't. I don't want to deal with your
how you get like this. That's another matter. Because if left alone, I would have had the consultant surgeon come from Canada. The consultant neurosurgeon who works for the government of the Bahamas to perform the surgery. And so that you understand me, I tell people close to me, if I have a problem for surgical intervention, call Dwayne Sands.
That's right.
I want to be able to let people know. That's what I do. Because I knew him from a young boy at high school in Massachusetts, to Tufts University, and I knew we had top of the class kind of fellow academically. That's why the member for Fort Charlotte was so dear to me. He had the same kind of academic journey, same colleges. But Mr. Speaker, when it comes down to this issue about whether or not Perry Christie will do the right thing for the Bahamas over Peter Nygaard or Sol Kersner or anybody else, look at the record. And I can tell you, sir, all of the young men, I believe it was only young men then, who went to that occasion in that video clip, and the euphoria of the moment that had Mr. Nygaard saying, I didn't see the clip, but saying, we got our country back. I would put their integrity on the line against anybody sitting on that side, blindfolded any day of the year, Mr. Speaker. This whole thing is a learning experience, Mr. Speaker, and nobody on this side, nobody condones foreigners getting directly involved in the politics of the Bahamas. We argue against it all times, Mr. Speaker. So, look, some things happen, sir. But when it comes to the integrity of members of this side, right to the last man.
Fight right to the end. Right to the end. To the grave.
But it is what they have done. They have caused me, in a stem cell debate, to reach a point where I'm going to show you that the only one who had something to sell was the Minister of Health.
That's right. That's right. Only person.
We don't have the former Minister of Health. We don't have a regime in place. And they're talking about what I promise or what people promise, and they can see. But I'm going to take you through it. Mr. Speaker, when I was elected Prime Minister this last time, I said there was a fight going on between Louis Bacon and Peter Nygaard. I indicated that Mr. Bacon was known to have been a major contributor to the fight to save Clifton from the FNM to putting the land where the three civilizations of the Bahamas touched. The Lucayne Indians, the slaves, and the landed gentry who came to our country. There was a movement with some of the personalities who are involved now in the fight to save Clifton, quote unquote. But when that movement reached a point, the PLP went on the beach at Clifton. And the PLP indicated by me that if we were to win the 2002 general elections, we would save Clifton by passing legislation that would put it beyond the reach of private development. We won the election. We passed the Clifton Heritage Bill, turned it into law, and we put Clifton in the hands of the Bahamian people. Now, in 2006, Louis Bacon applied for the right. And by the way, this is the person who's financing, I think, in part or in whole, the fight for Clifton. In 2006, he had made application to the then government, of which Marcus Bethel was the then Minister for the Environment, for the right to open up an inlet for his boats to the sea. The Best Commission opposed it. They said that he should use the same inlet used by Peter Nygaard because they were neighbors. They even argued that the rock separating the two was of such where it ought not to be done. This is the Best Commission. I remember that who Louis Bacon was, and Pericles Melis, his lawyer, came to me, made representations to me. This is the man now who caused me, as Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Minister of Transport to be placed in court over this same issue now of what they're going on at Clifton, with a threat of penal notice. Meaning if you don't do something, you go to jail. I'm going to tell you the history. A lot of fight took place, and I wrote on the file in my handwriting that Louis Bacon has proven to be a friend of the Bahamas, meaning of the fight at Clifton, and that I did not want him to be hostage to his neighbor, who was Peter Nygaard. Now, they ain't calling me no Louis Bacon man, but this is the only written record now. The Minister of the Environment then told me this was a matter of fundamental importance to the environment. The people supporting Bacon, including his lawyer Pericles Melis, went to great lengths to show that it wouldn't be that kind of damage, and Bacon had applied for that and for remedial work on the beach on the northern side and for growing. The same kind of things that Nygaard involved in on the northern side of the property. When the elections came, Marcus Bethel had not compromised, and I had not pursued it. But Louis Bacon had broken out into the sea without permission. This would accuse Nygaard. I won the election and decided now we are faced with a situation where there is obvious accretion that the Nygaard land associated with his buildings on the beach had grown and increased in size. I saw the file which showed that even when the Port Authority compromised, a letter from the then head of it said that the new Ministry of Maritime Affairs had given permission. The minister was Dion Folks. They didn't get it from the PLP.
Get it right, get it right.
But immediately on the F&M winning, they got the permission. They got the permission. They ruled in favor of Bacon, notwithstanding the fact that the best commission said no. Similar to what happened in Exuma.
I wonder what that is.
So you know one country twice?
Listen now.
Country individual twice. If you're talking
I then decided, as Prime Minister, I wanted to understand this whole issue. Because I'd seen this whole thing before. Fred Smith had taken us to court in Guanaqui. I'd seen it before. I even described it as foolishness. Because the same players involved in it were being funded in the same way. So I engaged a consultant to have a study done of the Clifton Bay. And people say, well, why would you waste money doing a study? Because of this same fight, which may end up in court, which in fact has me in court with some judicial review. And the study examined the history of Lightfoot Key, all of the reports that were done on it, including modern reports commissioned by the people who were against NIGAD. And the study examined the accretion of land by NIGAD. The study indicated to us that what was being done was not the correct way to do it, and in any event the necessary permissions were not there. We have the written details of the implications of Louis Bacon breaking out into the sea, and unwritten certifications that up to this point, as I'm speaking, questioning whether or not they got dredging permit and paid the fees, etc., etc. The study looked at the work that was done out there and the challenges to beaches out there. But I forwarded the study to the Minister of Works, the Deputy Prime Minister, who, in accordance with the report, issued a stop order to Mr. NIGAD that the work be stopped immediately. That's what a responsible government does. No further approvals were given. A process is now ensuing where a determination as to the course of action we take has to be effective or actualized. Members should know that whenever someone reclaims land, it becomes the land of the Crown. That in Baker's Bay today in Abaco, we have a structured deal where when they reclaim land, we get a percentage of it when it is sold and we give the fee simple. That's by a deal. In Cat Island, the new heads of agreement, or the heads of agreement, that I amended, says that when they reclaim the land, they have to, in terms of putting a marina in place, after environmental studies and environmental management plans are in place, the land will become the land of the government of the Bahamas, just like NIGAD's land. And then we will debate and negotiate how it is disposed of. In this case, I tell them 50%. I improved upon the deal we had with Baker's Bay. That they market it, they sell it, and we get 50%. In Cat Island. We will determine how we deal with the NIGAD issue. We will determine how we deal with the whole Bay of Clifton. When I was last Prime Minister and we negotiated the Albany deal, we put as a condition that in consideration of our giving approval for Albany, we would wish the developer to do two things for the country. One, to remediate the beach between the Moscow household and the caves, that stretch out there, and to make it a 40 feet wide beach and for people to be able to park and enjoy themselves. And the second thing was to give us at 50,000 an acre, 300 acres of land, that we would be able to guarantee to young Bahamians coming home they will have land to purchase at an affordable price, which is very difficult for them now. All through the Ingram term, we never saw that happen. It became puzzling to me when I saw him do the beach at Montague, when I know we had a deal to do the beach at West. In our first meeting with the Albany developers, I asked the question, what had happened to their agreement? They provided in writing where the England government waived their obligation, saying you don't have to do this. You do not have to do it. No land and no beach. That they were going to do it now. They were agreed, committed to do this as a condition of our agreement. They waived it. And then in this extraordinary contradictory way, went to Montague and said, look what we're doing for Montague. At a cost to the people.
What it costs to waive that? That's what we got to ask.
It is amazing. You see, and remember now, just remember this, that we have the opportunity to govern this country. We know that last time when we put provisions in place, because we were thinking of just governing for the Bahamas and not thinking of governing in 5 years, we allowed them to have currency in their argument. Oh, you started the straw market, but you ain't finished it. Oh, you build thousands of classrooms, hundreds of classrooms, but you ain't built no school. Not ever again. Not ever again. Will that ever be a subject that they could whip us with? We are not going to allow that to happen. We came to Parliament and we said that we are going to commit ourselves to stem cell legislation. I disclosed to the Bahamian public that Peter Nygaard, God bless him like this, said to me he would not want to invest in any country where there's not legislation and a legislative regime. He, like other investors, and I'm going to tell you, said to me that in Thailand, the minister, the leader of the opposition spoke about Thailand, that they had to stop their program because they did not have the legislative protection for it. We wanted to attract the best scientists in the world. And why would they come to the Bahamas? They would come to the Bahamas because even though research on stem cells is active in the United States of America, the FDA has been slow in approving certain programs that are now being done in Europe and being officially done in Europe and all the health systems of Europe, and when you see Americans going to Europe for that treatment. This is a book called A Life Decoded by a man named J. Craig Venter. This is the man who's credited with breaking the code of the genetic code of the body, and who has defied imagination in being able to do that. They said when he announced it, they had two calls, one from the Pope and one from President Barack Obama. I sat with him over dinner. He was flown in with one of the major investors in this country to have dinner with us, to talk to me about his research, to further enhance my appreciation of the role the Bahamas can play offshore the United States of America, not in some clandestine, cheap way, as the Guardian editorial would have opined today, but in a soaring, uplifting level of medical research done by some of the top scientists of the world. Someone who is well familiar with this enterprise has just invested in Bimini. And they are going to put a wellness center in Bimini. And they are going to bring some of the world's foremost scientists from around the world to Bimini to engage in research. Just today, the Minister of Health received a communication from the proposers of Okeanos to indicate that Australia has just passed the law legitimizing the procedure that they want to use in their clinic in Freeport if they're licensed, and feeling very good about it. They made an announcement that Professor Antonio Colombo is named to Okeanos Heart Institute's Medical Advisory Council. He's a leader, international leader in cardiology. Dr. Colombo is director of the Cardiac Catheterization Laboratory at Columbus Hospital and chief of invasive cardiology at San Rafael Hospital, both in Milan, Italy, and is a visiting professor of medicine at Columbia Medical Center in New York, USA. Those are the kinds of people. In Okeanos, the chief medical officer, Dr. Howard Walpole, trustee of the American College of Cardiology. Medical Advisory Council leaders in cardiac cell therapy, this is Okeanos, Dr. Leslie Miller, Chief of Cardiology, University of Dr. Leslie Miller, Chief of Cardiology, University of South Florida. Dr. Farrell Mendelson, Cardiology, Alabama. Dr. Eric Duckers, Erasmus, University of Holland. People who are highly credentialed, people who are highly connected in the research world, people who themselves have an obligation by the very nature of their reputation to only be associated with a product that can withstand any scrutiny. That's one of the applicants to the Bahamas, Okeanos. That's the one we stopped. That's the one that has spent up to $8 million already. And that is the one where if the Minister of Health, at the time, now the leader of the opposition, had actually engaged in the most rudimentary checks, would have found that the person described as the chief operating officer is fighting bankruptcy in the courts in Florida. Full-fledged case going on. And with the trial at the end of the month, and why and how he would have the ability in today's Bahamas to stand to his feet and charge someone like me, where he makes a giant step over a perceived political donation and draw the conclusion about me. But let me walk you through a process. Okeanos applied to the Bahamas government. It set out all the things I've just described. This is 2010. Okeanos had as a sponsor a Dr. Winston Forbes, who's a cardiologist in Freeport. The understanding being that he will be a sponsor to the Ministry of Health as a cardiologist, therefore will be associated with their work and be able to help police their work. Approval in principle is given with Dr. Forbes as the sponsor. The developers then came down and met with the Minister of Health and told him that they're changing their sponsor. Listen to me now. They're changing their sponsor to a Dr. Seratopoulos, who has the clinic at Life Key. Listen now. Dr. Forbes protested because how could you give the coverage and the accountability from Life Key to Freeport? Dr. Millis, the developer, Mr. Feshbach of Okeanos, said, Dr. Millis says, you do not have to apply to have the procedures you want to use, medical procedures, approved. Just let us know that you change your sponsor. Your sponsor is acceptable. Listen now. That's more than flat. Listen. Listen now. This is the Ministry of Health. This is the Bahamas government. And this is the Ministry of Health acting on the behalf of the Bahamas government. Listen. And I want you to tell me what the reasonable inference is. We are now in March. We are now in March of 2012. Wow. The elections are 6 weeks away. I beg your pardon. The leader of the opposition, then Minister of Health, told the man that I met with the Prime Minister. And I told the Prime Minister that you are bringing this program that's approved in Europe, but not yet approved in the United States of America, and the Prime Minister signed off on it. This is what the man telling us in writing. The man is telling this now to my government in writing.
Was the infrastructure there the police?
No. I can get to that. I can get to that.
No, man, it had to have been there.
No. Listen. The man said that the Minister of Health, the leader of the opposition, said, I support you enthusiastically.
what you want to do.
Now, look now. We knew who the agent was for Okeanos. There was something now developed in law called agent.
Yes.
Not lawyer, agent. The agent was a highly placed F&M.
Who that was?
I ain't got to call names. Let me tell you. Female.
Oh, Lord.
The agent was a highly placed F&M.
Yeah. That's all you get. An agent.
The lawyer was such.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Thank you.
The new doctor was a highly placed, highly connected family. People who donate to the F&M.
And they dropped 4 or 4.
And the family announced they would be major investors before the election in Okeanos. Now I ask you, let's cut it.
Go down and
Listen,
step by
this is the Minister of Health, now leader of the opposition, who comes to this parliament and says that the minister before me, my predecessor, closed down a clinic in Freeport because the clinic was dealing with unregulated work and dealing where there was no regime in place for it, so he closed it down. And he held that out to us as a good thing. We know that because we were a part of the cabinet that closed it down. But this minister, who knows that took place, and this is what I want to ask each of you, decided he was going to agree and have his ministry agree. In the same island where the clinic was closed down, to have a clinic dealing with much more sophisticated work. All the things he said about the need for surveillance and the need for scientific surveillance. No law in place, no regime in place, connected people from the F&M in place.
the president of the Senate, man. Call it.
No, I don't want the Prime Minister of the Bahamas descend to the point where I got to call names. But I want you to know. No, I want you to know a clue. Listen, but I'm now presenting to the House of Assembly such as we're constituted. The Minister of Health, what manner of man, who is an educated man, who's an obstetrician gynecologist, who has been a consultant physician to the Princess Margaret Hospital, this man who describes himself as a man of science, a man who comes to conclusions based on science, who says he understands stem cell, but we're not ready for stem cell scrutiny, we're not ready for the regime, we're not ready for the therapy, we can't do it, not now. Yet this man, this same man, approved the facility in Freeport, the regime in Freeport. What manner of man will come to Parliament a year later and says, I'm against it, when he himself what manner of man? Could politics reach a point? Politics reach a point where this extraordinary, gargantuan contradiction, where I, as the Minister of Health, on behalf of the sovereign government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, agree for you in principle to go and conduct this research. I know there's no law in place. I know there's no procedure in place. I just have an ethics committee write you. And listen, there were other applications to him.
Many others. Many others. Thank God we got the power.
Listen.
Why this one?
And you know.
Wrong agent.
You got a lawyer and an
Wrong
agent.
agent.
Mr. Speaker, and then you call the police. You got a lawyer and an agent.
Let me just say this to you. What manner of man will come to this Parliament? What manner of party where a deputy leader says, I'm going to be I don't know what he's talking about, but they say, but I got to conform the cause of my leader.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say this to
She
you.
done set him up.
Let me say this to you.
Yeah. She done set him up.
I have had the greatest privilege of sitting in a room with Dr. Conwell Brown and Dr. Richard Stack and talking to them about this subject. I had the greatest pleasure of sitting at the University of Miami with President Shalala, with the Dean of the Medical School and Vice President Goldsmith, and with the head of stem cell research, Dr. Hare, and speaking about the Bahamas, where not for one moment did the University of Miami, these illustrious people, and Donna Shalala used to be the Secretary of Health for Bill Clinton when he was President of the United States of America. So she understands this subject. She understands a country like the Bahamas and the need for it to have the support that we're asking for, that we're looking to Canada for, that we're looking to the developers for, the people who apply, that we're looking to ourselves, that we're looking to the University of Miami. And they offer that support. Even to the point where we could set up jointly a major laboratory to do all the measuring here. Amen. The Bahamas, University of Miami together. And as God would have it, ZNES was in Miami to cover a demonstration, and they were able to come into the room and hear the president, and hear the dean, and hear the stem cell research director speak about this wonderful opportunity that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has to move forward in this research. We even spoke about the possible commitment of the university to the cancer operation in the absence of Dr. Porter of Conwell Brown, Dr. Conwell Brown. They don't want to be associated with Dr. Porter. That's an after the event thing that has happened. But they know, and Conwell Brown knows, what he has to do, and he's done it. For me, I have no brief. I just work on the premise that a person is assumed innocent until proven guilty. That's the system we have. God bless him. I wish him luck. But I'm Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and every day I'm Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, I have to have the best interest of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas at hand. You don't have to ask me what kind of decision I can make. It can be a decision in the best interest of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Conwell Brown, so Dr. Conwell Brown, they brought a great feeling of joy to me when I met with them last Friday. They told me of the people who had just agreed to associate with their operations here in the Bahamas. They told me that the first phase will be at the Centerville Pavilion. They described the number of jobs they would create. They described the investment they would make, a full proposal, comprehensive proposal. They described the impact that they'd have, and they described where they would wish to purchase, and that they are entering into a purchase agreement to purchase major facilities for the second phase. They're in this one in a real way. Dr. Richard Stack, who is one of the former deans of Duke University, and then brought me the bios of the two persons who had just agreed to come on board with them. And it is just an unbelievable stack of credentials that they have. Dr. Judith L. Swain is currently the executive director of the Singapore Institute for Clinical Sciences and the Lien Ying Chow Professor of Medicine at the National University of Singapore. Prior to coming to Singapore, she was the Dean for Translational Medicine and founding director of the College of Integrated Life Sciences at the University of California in San Diego. Dr. Swain previously served as chair of the Department of Medicine at Stanford University and held the Arthur Bloomfield and George E. Becker Professor of Medical Sciences, Professor of Genetics, and Director of Cardiovascular Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. Listen, y'all hear what I'm saying? There is nobody better in the world. And this crew are here challenging us on how we're going to put a regime in place. You all leave here today knowing we are introducing to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas a new regime that caused the member for South Africa to stay here because he knew in his heart this was the right thing to do and the right thing to support. Dr. Swain has served in a number of national leadership roles, including President of the American Society for Clinical Investigation, President of the American Association of Physicians. She served on the NIH Director Standing Committee on Clinical Research. Look here, let me go to the next one. Edward W. Holmes, CEO, President of Sanford Consortium Regenerative Medicine, Distinguished Professor, University of California, Vice Chancellor, Dean Emeritus of Health Sciences, University of California, Executive Director, Chairman, Biomedical Research. Dr. Holmes was appointed a Howard Hughes medical investigator at Duke University School of Medicine in 1974. Later became the James B. Vintergarten Professor of Medicine. He was recruited to the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine in 1991. As the chair of the Department of Medicine and the Frank Wister Thomas Professor of Medicine and Genetics, in 1997 he became the Joseph Grant Professor in the School of Medicine, the Senior Associate Dean for Research, Vice President of Translational Medicine and Clinical Research, and on and on and on at Stanford University as well. Right? In January 1999, he returned to Duke University as the Dean of the School of Medicine and Walter Kempter Professor in Medicine and Genetics. Dr. Holmes was appointed Vice Chancellor for Health Sciences and Dean of the School of Medicine at the University of California, San Diego in 2000, and served in this role until October 2006. In 2006, he was appointed the Executive Deputy Chairman of the Biomedical Research Council in the Agency of Science, Technology, and Research in Singapore, a position he still holds, and the Executive Chairman of the National Medical Research Council of Singapore, a position he held until 2011. They are engaged currently in research. They have impeccable credentials. They will withstand the scrutiny on the world basis. And so that you understand, the law as it is being passed by us sets out a process that requires the applicant companies to meet certain standards. Those standards include how they're constituted, for example. Who is a part of it? The law itself speaks to there being someone on the oversight committee, the National Ethics Committee, of being experienced in stem cells. So we know we got to go abroad to find that person. It speaks about having people of different genders and even different races. It talks about a multidisciplinary, a multinational kind of constituted board that will enable us to put in a proper regime. It speaks about constant scientific reviews. That's in the legislation. The question then is, who is going to help us administer it? The first point is, these people know that the world will be looking at them. They know they are setting up a regime for people to come in. They know they will be judged on their results. They themselves have impeccable credentials and are being associated with these enterprises as professors and former professors, as scientists, because they know they are committed to work with the highest level of integrity and research and therapeutic interventions, and this country will be proud to have them accepted in it. The government, through the Ethics Committee and the Scientific Review Committees, will ensure that we have the personnel, both Bahamian and foreign, who will help us introduce this regime. And I told you when I came in, that 20, 30 years ago, I negotiated with Yale University because we had then one or two ophthalmologists, one of whom was in Bahamas and the next one was in Toronto, and we needed coverage. And so I negotiated coverage with Yale University. And all of the ministers of health, including the current leader of the opposition, just accepted it. Nobody will ever look back and say Perry Christie did that. Because, you know, the F&M had it that he's a procrastinator. He can't make decisions. He doesn't do things like that. Well, the devil is a liar for them. Tell them that this Prime Minister, this Perry Christie, has his integrity that he wears on his sleeve. That I stand up, tell him, I stand up, I conduct myself in a way that I ought to as Prime Minister. That I want to be able to ensure that the generation that will succeed me will know that we have to work hard, that we are not going to stop our work and be diverted because of interventions that they make that have nothing to do with the legislation before us. Tell them for us that we are committed to doing the big things. Tell them and tell the minister when he speaks about, oh, I'm being blamed for this and I'm being blamed for that, and you know, and tell him we don't count him like that.
That's right. Yes.
We don't count him like that.
No.
Tell him that you need the answers to the question: why would an intelligent, medically qualified scientist by the name of former Minister of Health, now leader of the opposition, why would he subject the Bahamas to the absolute ridicule and contempt that he says we're doing with this legislative regime because we don't have the ability to monitor it? But why would he have subjected his country to the ridicule and contempt of anyone looking at it and saying that very clearly and very obviously he gave permission, knowing elections were coming, knowing that big donors were lined up to give the money to the F&M, knowing those things, there's no other logical conclusion to draw. And I'm being generous. I didn't say they were giving it to him personally. Didn't even ask the question. Because he is a wealthy man in himself. And I don't want to make that jump. But remember this. I told you I know who raises the money for the FM and Lightfoot Key and places like that. Some of us have had people come to us and say, why do they speak so badly of you and the PLP? Why do they arrogate unto themselves the view that they don't smell? Only the PLP. Why do they walk around with this imperious, all-knowing stride throughout our country where they have the right to have all of the investors support them? And that nothing they do will allow the inference that they're doing it for favor. How else could that place have been licensed weeks before a general election where a minister a year later comes here and says this is the kind of regime ought to be in place, where Marcus Bethel had it in place? How did he manage to let it go through his fingers, knowing what he knows, I'm not putting it in place. You tell me when he got fired.
The narrow, the perception.
What? How? In today's Bahamas. And who cares? They're running around here talking about NIGAD. Well, NIGAD is going to be, Mr. NIGAD is going to be subjected to a process based on,
Like everybody else.
like everybody else,
Correct. Like everyone on the
eh?
side.
Based on,
No minister will make plans.
no, it is more than a red herring. I guess red is the color, so red herring. Okay? But I just want to say that see, God bless experience. I knew it would be an issue. I didn't know, as I conclude, I didn't know that Louis Bacon would have allowed himself, if he has, to take the steps that he did. Because he's somebody who held the cause before. And so that people understand, when I became Prime Minister, a lawyer, I believe, friendly to us, had led the drafting of an affidavit. The Tribune said, I clearly was surprised when they said they had it. I'm not surprised. I resented it. I took great objection to it. I told them that I do not live in the Bahamas, where two men who are investors in this country fight and only the country suffers. I want you to hear this now. NIGAD was afraid to come to the Bahamas because Hubert Ingham would arrest him. That's his belief. And Bacon was afraid to come to the Bahamas because I would arrest him when we won. That's his belief. You don't hear any craziness like that. I told the lawyers or the legal representatives of Mr. Bacon that I could speak for Hubert Ingham in this regard. We do not run a country like that, where two multimillionaires or billionaires are fighting over what was an easement, the right to access property, fighting a lot, spending a lot of money. NIGAD looking for the right to access his property, Bacon arguing about what kind of right that should be. And saying all sorts of things about each other. I met with Bobby Kennedy, who was a friend of Louis Bacon, and who, for all intents and purposes, conducted himself as a friend of Perry Christie and the Bahamas. And I told him, in the office of Prime Minister, I do not conduct myself that way. Bacon had a friend who lives in, Louis Bacon had a friend who lives in Harbour Island as a resident, very, very wealthy man, who called me to speak about Bacon leaving the Bahamas. And I told him that ought not to happen in this country. That I don't do that sort of stuff. I met with NIGAD and to tell him the same thing. Officials went out to inspect the property. When they had finished the report, I went out myself to look at the easement or the right of access, knowing that we're going to have to make a decision on it, and that I'd commissioned a study. And I told them, I resent my name being called in an application before the magistrate's court where they're trying to prosecute each other and get my name out of that. I thought that was that. I knew who the lawyers were. I knew how, I guess, one of them brought that thing to minutes. But you've been in politics so long. I have. You just have to keep on moving forward. I met with Louis Bacon. Louis Bacon is a man who was then awarded some great thing at the Audubon by the Audubon Society for environmental work, who had invited me to come to New York to sit with Uma Thurman, the movie star, and some other movie stars. I told him, Mr. Bacon, I don't know what your problem is. I only want to be involved so far. But the country cannot continue to suffer with this major battle being waged in this way. What are the rights and wrongs? It's a matter for the courts. But now they have this Save Clifton. If it weren't for the PLP, they wouldn't have anything to argue about. And at the end of this process, we're going to do something about Clifton. I don't want to prejudge the mitigation that has to take place. But rest assured, we're going to do something, because I looked at the developments and evolution of Lightfoot Key and the impacts of Lightfoot Key, and the deputy and our lawyers now have the benefit of it going forward. And that's why I said, meet me in court then. That's where I want to end the NIGAD matter, because I don't even know if NIGAD is going to formally request a license for stem cells. And so when I said, I know of his interests, that I heard a haunting story of a man who was searching for answers when his mother was dying, and the same emotions that Gus Cooper had, and who resolved that whether in China through major investments in China, or whether through banking stem cells in South Korea, or whether in Panama. But when I met with him, it wasn't Perry Christie and Nygaard, it was Perry Christie, Nygaard, and scientists from the University of California. And the matter wasn't what you could do for me, the matter was what these people could do for the Bahamas. When we discussed it, we discussed about his employing the person who Kobe Bryant and those went to in Germany. And about the Governor Perry of Texas and having his stem cell treatment for his back. And that he was having the same thing. I had a relationship with a lot of the investors in this country, and I just want to say this. One day, Phil Ruffin came to the Bahamas, and he said he wanted to look at Albany. And I went out to Albany, he drove out there. And he said he wanted to talk with me because he wanted to make a bid to buy Atlantis in connection with one of the major companies in Las Vegas. He owned Treasure Island, this other people owned a number of casinos. I told him, I said, listen, I'm driving my car with me from Albany to the office of Prime Minister, then your vehicle could take you to Paradise Island. the deputy leader of the opposition went to town on me. I gave Ruffin a lift in the car of the Prime Minister. I ain't ride on no helicopter.
That's your car.
Your side of
That's your car. That's your car.
Everybody knows I was Ruffin's lawyer. Everybody knows Hubert Ingram was my law partner. Everybody knows Brave Davis was my law partner. And he ain't give me no shares in the buildings he bought up there on East Bay Street.
Even if
It's like you need a lawyer, man.
And he and Philip McKinsey didn't even think of me. But that's what enables me to speak so openly, not waffle as the chairman of the FNM says, so openly about what my government is doing and not doing. And they could tell you that what you hear from me now is what they will hear from me around the table. That God has given me and graced me with an opportunity to be Prime Minister of this country again, and that we are going to do some big things as a result of it. That stem cell, yes, that I want you to know that stem cell legislation will be passed by us today, that will go to the Senate and will become the law in the Bahamas. I want you to know that by the end of this month, the University of Miami and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas would have worked out a joint program to enable us to have all the backup we need, to do all the things we need. I want you to know that many Bahamians will benefit from this new relationship. I want you to know that the scientists of this world who are looking to come to the Bahamas have had a man who is the owner and developer of Albany say to us this week that he wants to expand Albany, that using part of the land that I was supposed to get for the Bahamian people, he wants to put a wellness center on it and some other developments, expanding Albany, but that he is the creator of a major hospital complex in the United States of America. By reputation, the richest Englishman in the world and developer of Albany. And that he knows that the people who will come to the Bahamas for stem cell treatment will come to his wellness center where the brightest and the best will be staffed, where Bahamian professionals, every which one of the proposals, speak about all the Bahamian professionals being invited to be a part of it. And that's why Dwayne Sands or Ernie Sands spoke in support of it. Because it moves us forward. And so as we stand here, we know that Freeport has made application. We know that indications are that NIGAD interests may or may not be involved in it. And for that matter, I don't know what he would say to people in my ministry and whatnot, but never was there any intention on my part to agree or for him to offer any kind of major commercial undertaking out on that property. I mean, people create debates and argue against it, but it doesn't arise. We have indications from Bimini that a wellness center will be put there. We have indications, I said, from Albany that a wellness center will be put there. And we have a major formal proposal setting out every possible deal the government, every bit of information the government would need to make a decision on from the enterprise of Dr. Conwell Brown. All right, and it is this here, and it says the Institute for Advanced Medical Procedures Limited, project proposal to the Bahamas Investment Authority, a special transnational medical tourism initiative. And so this is the one full, complete application before us that will move forward in the ordinary way, that they have moved quickly to line up the professors involved in it. The University of Miami and their research, and what I said, please don't take lightly, that they are researching in 7 diseases now using stem cell therapy approved by the FDA. And so that you understand the extent to which we have had discussion, they've even offered to provide the stem cells that will be used in the Bahamas from the laboratories of the University of Miami. That's a question of whether we do it or not going through, but they've even offered that so as to ensure the integrity of the stem cells that are being used in the Bahamas. We have thought it through. We have prepared ourselves as a government for this new enterprise. Unlike the Guardian's editorial, we're not talking about a cheap intervention. We're talking about one where one day Bahamian scientists will win prizes internationally for the work they do in the laboratories connected with research on this subject matter. And that is because, to the knowledge of the FDA in America, scientists from America who are doing work that is federally approved there will also engage in work here that is approved in Europe and not yet approved in the United States of America, with a view to advancing stem cells. And I can tell you, if it does help people with spinal injuries, if it does help children with autism, if it does help the orthopedic injuries that take place and proper healing of them, if it does help Bahamians who are now today traveling to try to find some answer to the disease that they have, if it does help them. And in this case, the Conwell Brown Medical Institute or the Institute for Advanced Medical Procedures talks about limiting theirs to cardiovascular interventions and orthopedic interventions. And they have top experts in the field associated with it. And so I'm satisfied that the Bahamas will have an opportunity to do exactly what Dr. the member for Bain and Grandstand said, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to issue in this new regime, that it may have positive impacts on the economy. It will have positive impacts on research, because the people who we have spoken to are to take research they're doing now and bring it here to the Bahamas and continue it here in the Bahamas under the regime that we have established. And we are going to police it. And the daughter of the Member of Parliament for Engliston is not the only scientist, Bahamian scientist. We are going to be amazed to see those who will surface as a result of knowing what we're doing here in the Bahamas. I want to be able to end, Mr. Speaker, by saying that as we speak, there are Bahamians, yes, who are challenged on basic health care matters, who need access to medical care in some of our islands. Yes, there are people in our country who go to bed hungry. We were told about a group that provides 10,000 meals a day, someone said?
Hands for hunger.
Something?
Hands for hunger.
Hands for hunger. We can't duck it, avoid it. But that's why the Bahamian people elected us. Because they know we're going to tackle the big question. They know we can do it. And make the tough decisions, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the aim is at the end of each year we are in to be able to look back and say, this is what we've done to advance the cause of the Bahamas and to advance the cause of Bahamians. And I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that all of my colleagues in this House will remind themselves of the thousands of people that stood on the parks of this country, cheering us on with the hope that we would win the general elections and form the government of the Bahamas. I told the firm of KPMG yesterday, I took a break from cabinet and went to a meeting, that before the end of the year, God willing, we will introduce a new regime in the provision and distribution of electricity. I told them that. I told them, Mr. Speaker, that whether we like it or not, and notwithstanding the good work that the current member for Tall Pines is doing as chairman in terms of reducing costs and trying to bring focus to greater levels of efficiency, that in this country we have to take the big decision to bring greater relief to the people of our country. And we are going to do that. And so, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the day when the men and women who will be the principals behind these enterprises for research and treatment begin their work in the Bahamas. And I will ensure that this day in the House of Assembly will be used to incentivize our efforts on behalf of the Bahamian people. That we won't forget this day. And God knows it's that I won't. But we've been in here long enough to know that this too will pass. And that I once told the Member of Parliament for Kalani, when during the by-election in Abaco, he got up on a platform and came dangerously close to doing what he did here. And we were before the Church of God of Prophecy doing a groundbreaking in the Anglican constituency, and the Member of Parliament for Marcos City was there. When I told him, and I quoted from the Bible, I said, I could curse you. I said, we can win the by-election. I know that. Wish we did. I said, but I'm going to repeat some scripture for you. And that I repeated often enough because I needed to continue to protect me through the challenges that come with public life. I said, I don't know what possessed you to want to get on a platform in Abaco and come close to calling me a crook. But I want you to know that Before these preachers here from the Church of God of Prophecy, I wanted to say that I repeat the verse, put on the full armor of God, all the time. So when the day of evil comes, you're able to stand your ground. I repeat it all the time. And that when you've done your best to stand, you still stand. With the belt of truth, it goes on wrapped around your waist. And the breastplate of righteousness in place. Speaks about the sword and helmet. But it goes on to the final verses, which says, against the fiery darts and arrows that will be thrown against you. I repeat it because I have to rationalize some of the nasty and dirty things that are said about me over the many years of my public life. And why I should always rise up above it. Mr. Speaker, I said to my cabinet when I was talking about Gus Cooper that I'm, in all probability, in the final decade of my life. My life. I may live to be 90. But I told him I judge myself on that reality. Dr. Nottage didn't know I saw him, but tears came out of his eyes. Because he knew what that means to us. I am not going to allow any of my colleagues to compromise on their efforts to make this country a better country. I'm not going to allow them to surrender or to retreat in the face of the kinds of attacks we have seen. I'm going to be pushing them every day to achieve and to attain. I'm not going to hesitate to talk to people like the member for South Abaco. God knows what he's going through now and what obstacles are in his way. But it takes, as the member for West End and Bimley says, a great deal of courage and conviction to do what he did today. And we thank him for it. And he knows, Mr. Speaker, that when I went to Baker's Bay to meet with the owners of Baker's Bay, I just didn't take the Member of Parliament for North. I took him with me as well. And they heard me say the respect I have for him. And there was never any effort on my part to invite him to do anything contrary to his political convictions or his position as an F&M Member of Parliament. I simply wanted to accord a man who took a position with Lyndon Pinling and had dynamite thrown his way, planes shot up, who had the courage of his conviction as a white Bahamian to stand with a black party, a nationalist party, and stand. We may miss this occasion and just smooth over it. But it is an important statement that he has made today with respect to Parliament and his respect for Parliament. And I've told him, and I will tell him again, that every time he has seen me, he has spoken to me about what he could do just as a member of Parliament and a citizen to advance the cause of agriculture. He has sat in my office and he's called investors. He has spoken to me about work he was doing that Mr. Member for Mount Moriah has succeeded in. All of these things, Mr. Speaker. And I just say them to say that oftentimes we don't pay attention to these men who have to give up so much and receive odium and contempt from their fellow Bahamians because of the politics of their stand. Whatever is the report today about what we have done in here today, we will not be stopped in our effort to move the country forward. We will work harder to make it happen. We will be more diligent in respecting the people who voted for us and much more involved, and I now declare, much more involved in sending the message out to the Bahamian people of the work we're doing. We are not going to rely on the normal ways of communication. They clearly have activated themselves politically, and we will meet them on the beaches, in the water, in the air, but we will meet them. And we will place ourselves before the Bahamian people on the basis, as I said, when I went up to Elizabeth and said we are going to contest the election, there will be no retreat and no surrender.
Thank you, Right Honourable Member for Centerville, and thank all members for an extraordinary debate. The question is that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes.
Further second reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings at this stage. I would wish to move that the House dissolves itself into a committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker and the Chair.
Second. Very well. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House resolve itself into committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair. As many are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The Deputy Speaker will now take the chair.
Committee of the whole. Committee of the whole. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the long title of a bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the long title to the act, a bill for an act to provide for the conduct and the regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes, be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The long title has been agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the short title. This act may be cited as the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Act 2013.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the short title to this act, Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013, be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The short title has been agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that sections 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 be agreed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that sections 2 through 14 be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. Clauses 2 through 14 have been agreed, inclusive.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that a bill cited as the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Act 2013 be agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013 be agreed in its entirety. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those opposed shall stand. The bill has been agreed in its entirety.
Yeah, which you have your amendment? Give me a copy of the book, National Training Agency. National Training Agency. Nine, 15. Yeah. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
I'd like to move the long title of a bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the long title of a bill for an act for the National Training Agency be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The long title has been agreed.
I'd like to move that Section 1, short title and amendments be agreed.
Second.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that one more time?
That the short title be agreed.
Yes. It's been moved and seconded that the short title to this bill be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The short title has been agreed.
Speaker, I'd like to move that Sections 2 to Section 8 be agreed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Section 2 through 8 be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. Sections 2 through 8 have been agreed, or clauses 2 through 8 have been agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that Clause 9 be agreed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Clause 9 be agreed. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for
Central and South Eleuthera.
Central and South Eleuthera. Sorry.
Mr. Deputy, I move the following amendments to Clause 9 of the bill. A, in the head note, delete the words, quote, of the board, end quote. B, at subsection 2E, delete the word, quote, unquote, board, and substitute the word agency. C, at subsection 3, delete the word board immediately after the words, quote, the affairs of the, end of quote, and substitute the word agency. D, at subsections 4 and 5, delete the word board immediately after the words employee of the, and substitute the word agency.
It's been moved and seconded that Clause 9 of the National Training Agency Bill be amended as read. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. Clause 9 has been amended as read.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that clauses 10 to 12 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clauses 10 through 12 be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. Clauses 10 through 12 have been agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move that clause 13 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 13 be agreed. As many, Chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South Loup.
I wish to move the following amendment to clause 13 of the bill. Delete the word agency immediately after the words agency the, and substitute the word board.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 13 be amended as read. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. Clause 13 has been amended as read.
14 to 17 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clauses, 14 through 14 through 17 be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose will rise. Clauses 14 through 17 have been agreed.
I'd like to move that clause 18 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 18 be agreed. As many, Chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South Loup.
If it pleases you, Mr. Deputy, I wish to move the following amendment to clause 18. Insert immediately after section 18 the following as a new section 18A. Section 18A, annual report. 1. The board shall, after the end of each year, prepare an annual report on its activities during the last preceding year, and shall furnish such report to the minister not later than the 30th day of June. 2. The minister shall cause a copy of every report submitted to him pursuant to the section to be laid before both chambers of Parliament.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 18 be amended as read. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. Clause 18 has been amended as read.
Be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 19 be agreed. As many, Chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South.
I wish to move the following amendment to clause 19. Delete the words, quote, agency or institution, end of quote, wherever those words appear, and substitute the words such agency.
Been moved and seconded that clause 19 be amended as read. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall rise or stand. Clause 19 has been agreed, has been amended as read.
Speaker, I'd like to move that clauses 20 to 27 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clauses 20 through 27 be agreed. As many as in favor shall remain seated, and those that oppose shall stand. Clauses 20 through 27 have been agreed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that the schedule be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the schedule to this bill be agreed. As many, Chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South Loup.
I wish to move the following amendment to the schedule. At paragraph 6, delete the word council and substitute the word board.
It's been moved and seconded that the schedule to this bill be amended as read. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The schedule has been amended as read.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed, including the schedule.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that this bill in its entirety be agreed, including the schedule. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The bill has been agreed in its entirety, including its schedule.
Mr. Speaker, those are the two bills through which we will take through the committee stages after today. Therefore, sir, no Senate amendments. You got to wait. We haven't gotten there. I'd like to invite you to ask the Speaker to take the chair.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Speaker now takes the chair. As many as in favor shall remain seated. Those that oppose shall stand. The Speaker will now take the chair.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole has met and we have gone through two bills. One being the STEM Search, Research and Therapy Bill, making no amendments thereto. The other bill being the National Training Agency Bill. We have made amendments to clauses 9, 13, 8, and 19, and also to its schedule. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, honorable members. The chairman of the Committee of the Whole House has reported that the committee has gone through two bills with amendments thereto being made to the second, which is a National Training Agency bill. Third reading and passing of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to move the third reading and passing of a bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes, short title Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The bill will be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes.
Order that the bill do now pass, and the title declared to be the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Act 2013. For the third reading and passing of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
This is truly a day for landmark legislation. For I would like now to move for the third reading and passing of the National Training Agency Bill 2013.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The bill will be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes.
Order that the bill do now pass, and the title be declared to be the National Training Agency Bill 2013. For the third reading and passing of bills. None. Consideration of Senate amendments. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that we adopt the following Senate amendment. The Real Property Tax Amendment Bill 2013. In Clause 2 of the bill, delete the definition of commercial property. And in Clause 3 of the bill, delete Section 19A and substitute the following. 19A, liability of mortgagee in respect of commercial property, where a tax or surcharge in respect of property used for commercial purposes and mortgaged under a deed of mortgage executed before or after the coming into operation of this section remains unpaid for a period in excess of 90 days, the mortgagee of the commercial property shall pay all taxes or surcharges owed in respect of the property.
Thank you, honourable member. Senate amendments accepted. The chair recognizes honourable member for Golden Isles
Yes,
once again.
Mr. Speaker, further Senate amendment, an amendment to the Stamp Amendment Bill 2013.
Just before you move on, we didn't put the question to the first amendment. The question is that the following Senate amendment, consideration of the following Senate amendment. As many on favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Not a bill, the Senate amendments accepted. A real property tax. It has been moved and seconded to accept the Senate amendment on the Real Property Tax Amendment Bill 2013. As many on favor will remain seated, those opposed will stand. Order that the amendment be received. Real Property Tax Amendment Bill 2013. Further Senate amendments.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that we adopt the following Senate amendment, the amendment to the Stamp Amendment Bill 2013. Amendment to be made in Clause 2 of the bill, delete the new subclause 2 of Section 3B and substitute the following. 2, subsection 2, subclause 2, an application under subsection 1 shall not be made where the value of the property and dwelling house exceed $500,000. And in Clause 4, in paragraph B, in item 51A, insert after the words, quote, per annum, end quote, the words, quote, are converted into foreign currency and, end of quote.
Very well. Thank you, honourable member. Second. So moved and seconded to accept the following, the amendment, the Stamp Amendment Bill 2013. As many on favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Ordered that the amendments are adopted as read. Further Senate amendments? There are none. The chair recognizes honourable member for Bain and Grand Star.
There are no further Senate amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Resolutions. Member statements. The chair recognizes honourable member for Nassau Village.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to offer condolences to someone who is not technically a constituent of mine, but at the time when I would have first started campaigning, her house would have definitely fell within my constituency. And this is Mrs. Joan Roach, the wife of the late Canon Neil Roach. I spent my entire life at Holy Cross Church, and I know the family very well, so I would like to express my sincere sympathy and condolences from me and my family. And on a lighter note, Mr. Speaker, I would also like to congratulate a constituent of mine by the name of Candy Smith. She would have been, or she has successfully passed the bar of England and Wales, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I know that she did register and she did vote while she was off in school in England, and I trust that she did support me. But nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, her sister has also been called to the bar. I mean, I think that's why I perhaps have the name Dynamite, because most of my family members are dynamic. Her sister is 18 years old, Mr. Speaker, and she was called to the bar of England and Wales. I think that is a tremendous accomplishment for a Bahamian. And I just would like to congratulate her and her sister and also her parents. It's Gabrielle Turnquest. She was called to the bar at the age of 18. She graduated from college at the age of 16, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Further member statements? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to extend my condolences to the Roach family. Mr. Joan Roach actually resided in Marathon when the boundaries were cut, and I'm fully aware that she did vote in the last election. Mr. Speaker, as a member of Holy Cross, back when I was a youngster, Mr. Speaker, Father Roach and Mrs. Roach brought up and influenced the lives of many of us in that area. I lived within a mile of the church and was a frequent member there, including being an altar boy, Mr. Speaker. And I have... Yes, yes. Yes, back in those days, yes. But Mr. Speaker, it is a great sadness that I learned of her passing. Someone who I had the utmost respect for, very fond of on behalf of my wife, Zarina, my family, and the whole Marathon constituency. We want to extend our sincere condolences to the Roach family on this occasion. The ceremony, the burial, will take place on Friday at 10 a.m. at St. Agnes, and I'm sure a few members of this Parliament will be in attendance, including myself. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. Further member statements? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Seabreeze.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too wish to send condolences to the Roach family on the passing of the matriarch of that family. I schooled with the four daughters, Michelle, Marie, Carol, and Melanie, at the Great St. John's College, and I think you would be aware of that too, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, very well.
And of course, Father Roach also was there, and he taught us. I recall him, I think in the first form, taught us Latin. He was one of our Latin teachers, the Moa Masa Mat. Mama Samata Samat. So they were great educators, great parents, great contributors to our society. Father Roach was the priest at Holy Cross for many years and contributed greatly to the development of our people. And so at this very sad time, I would wish to extend my condolences to the girls. I should say the women now, and wish and hope and pray that God's blessings on them. I also want to take this time, Mr. Speaker, to say to my constituents that on the 17th of August, in the afternoon, that's Saturday, beginning at 2 in the afternoon, we'll be holding our Back to School Jamboree. We're also going to be celebrating our 40th independence, so we're asking all of the constituents to come out in their independence colors. And we're going to see how we can help to contribute to Back to School for the children in the area, and also to have a fun time. And so we hope and pray that we will have a very successful event on the 17th of August, and I invite them to come. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. Further member statements? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Mount Moriah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will be very brief. I would just like to, again, congratulate the young men at Freedom Farm for their stellar performances, both the 8 and under and 10 and under teams, which won their respective divisions. It's an accomplishment because the tournament has been in existence since for the last 23 years, and this is only the second time in 23 years that the Bahamas has won anything at that tournament. I must congratulate Senator Greg Burrows for the program he operates at Freedom Farm. Baseball is about discipline. Freedom Farm, on a yearly basis, has roughly 800 young men from January of the beginning of the year, January, until June. So that is the perfect opportunity to influence young men and what they do. And you have them under your control for that period of time. And trust me, if you look at graduates of that program, that Freedom Farm program, they're there from they're 4 years old until, most of them, until they're 18 years old. It plays a role in keeping them off the streets. It disciplines them, and it helps them not only to get an education, which is very important. So I want to congratulate Mr. Burrows, Senator Burrows, for what he does, what he's created, and that isn't something he's paid for. He does it of his own free will and in his own free time. So, that cannot be discounted, and he must be congratulated for that. From the World Series, we've brought, and it's called the Black World Series. It was developed for blacks, because blacks don't play baseball anymore in the United States. They play basketball and football because they're more lucrative. So this was created. This whole classic and tournament was created to attract blacks back to baseball. Baseball is probably 8% black. I think it's the rest is Latinos and whites. So this tournament was created to attract blacks back to baseball. We've brought some game balls, some championship balls from the tournament, signed by the players. One for the honorable member for Centerville, right honorable member. One for the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkins, and Salvador, and one for the honorable member for Carmichael. The speaker, we have a special gift for the speaker. We have a gift for the speaker, actually. Mr. Speaker, we have a gift for you, but unfortunately, because of the proceedings this morning, they could not impart it with you, but I'm sure you will receive. Thank you.
Well said, well said. Member for Montgomery. Thank you very much. Further member statements. The chair recognizes honorable member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He caught the speaker's eye.
I too would like to send my condolences firstly to the Roach family. As a resident of Highbury Park, I grew up in Holy Cross Church, having served as a cub and then a scout in that parish, and knowing full well the 4 sisters who attended St. John's College. I wasn't in the same set as you, Mr. Speaker, and the member for Seabreeze. I grew up at your ankles then, but certainly the Roach family has laid an indelible mark on everyone who lived in Highbury Park, and I want to send my condolences to the Roach family on behalf of myself and my family, parents, and siblings. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I would also like to congratulate the young men of Freedom Farm, the farmers. My son played with the a team that attended and was successful in the championship games, and while the member for Mount Moriah did not mention it, his son also played with the under-12 squad and was the fine young man who held up the trophy this morning. And I concur with the sentiments of the member for Mount Moriah. You know, he and I happen to have had kids who began the last year practicing together on the ballpark with Senator Burrows, preparing them for last year's activities. They happened to be drafted on 2 different teams and ended up playing in the championship game. Of course, we won. But nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, the reality is Freedom Farm would not be what it is without the participation of the many coaches who give of their own free time and the parents who support it. It is about discipline, and it is about excellence on and off the field. And I am certainly pleased that a lot of the young boys who are involved in Freedom Farm and young girls do well in baseball and do well academically, Mr. Speaker, and they should be hailed for that. And so, Mr. Speaker, before I sit, I also want to indicate that tomorrow morning at 8:30, I will be in my constituency office as usual. And so I invite constituents who would wish to see me to please visit the headquarters on the corner of Carmichael Road and Whitaker Avenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I too would wish to join the condolences for the Roach family on the passing of their dear mother, who was actually one of my favorite patients. I had the great privilege of working on her and her husband at different occasions with her arthritis and some other things. The most jolly and pleasant and loving, kind person that you could possibly ever meet. And as my mother used to say, people like us don't die, we just pass it on. So I'm sure you will see her and her 4 girls, different pieces of that joy that they will continue to spread. I also, too, sir, would like to congratulate the Freedom Farm Baseball League in their attainment of the first place in the under 10 and under 8 age categories at the Metropolitan Junior Baseball World Series. This league was started in 1966 by a great gentleman who now actually has Mr. Senator Greg Burrows sitting on his board of directors worldwide. It is the largest black baseball league on the planet. We also want to join with congratulating Coach Arnold Forms MP, Stevie Burrows, and Father Ken Dorset, who should all feel very, very proud for their accomplishments in this. We also had this morning, Mr. Speaker, someone who hails from Exuma. Her grandfather, Uncle Sam, was right across, they lived right across from Mount Carmel Baptist Church, and her father, who was here this morning, Maxwell, were extremely loyal to this party in days gone by. She is Walthia Roll, 6'6", shooting forward, who's now the first-round draft pick into the WNBA. Yeah. The first Bahamian female, of course, first Bahamian female, and we all remember the days of the great Michael Sweetbells Thompson. And we think Walthia, with her character, style, and grace, will usher in a new era of discipline in female sports. Mr. Speaker, it's very important to note that very few young girls in the Bahamas are now involved in sports, and we're looking for some role models to get young ladies back involved in sports. It is a game changer for them also. And last but not least, Mr. Speaker, Camp Carmichael, we want to congratulate all the people who helped us with Camp Carmichael this summer. We had several hundred kids out. The campus was very successful. We now move to getting everyone ready for back to school. The schools are being prepped in the area thanks to the Ministry of Education and their partners. And we'll have in October something called Carmichael Fest, where you'll see that service road about a mile long come to life with Bahamian art and culture. We tell people to look forward to that. It will be a great family time and a time for young artisans to come out and make some money. Speaker, I thank you very much. I congratulate you for your work.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements? The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, I just wish to bring condolences to 2 of the matriarchs of the Bain and Grandstown constituency, Mrs. Boswell from Parker Street, who lost her son, and Nurse Nichols, who lost her grandson in tragic circumstances several weeks ago. I'd like to give them my condolences and condolences of Terrell Williams and his mother and father, and hope that their souls rest in peace. I'd also like, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Grandstown Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is determined to start a series of parent seminars in an attempt to bring families back together, to teach the young parents particularly the art of parentcraft, because one of the major problems that we have, certainly in our constituency and generally in the country, is that many young persons who become parents so early in life do not really appreciate all the duties of a parent and how to develop good relationships with their children, how to help to keep them in school and keep them focused. And so the Seventh-day Adventist Church has taken this on for the Bain and Grantstown community. Mr. Speaker, we had our first seminar on Saturday past, which was extremely well attended and bodes well for the future. I'd also like, Mr. Speaker, to congratulate the residents of Rupert Dean Lane, who for the past 7 years have had an Emancipation Day weekend when they celebrate not only Emancipation Day, but the community and the neighborhood. Started on Friday. They had a walkabout on Saturday, went and visited all the elderly. On Sunday, they were at church at the Salvation Army Church on Meadow Street. And in the evening, they had an awards ceremony for the outstanding members of the community. And then on Saturday, Mr. Speaker, we had a fantastic time with the Urban Renewal Band, which was there, and Royal Bahamas Police Force Pop Band. And I would let you know that present was the Deputy Prime Minister, who entertained the crowd with the heel and toe.
You put on the move?
Oh yeah. Heel and toe, the yo-yo-yo, and the bo-bo. You all don't know those two. we didn't know them before. And cap it off at the Holly Gully, Mr. Speaker. Well, yours truly couldn't be outdone in my constituencies. I had to sing for them. I did a Sam Cooke album. Don't know much about history, chain gang, you know. Okay, right. So, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say that it's so important for us in our communities to visit with them in times of peace. You know, we like to go and visit people when someone dies, and we like to go and visit when there's a tragedy. But the kind of spirit shown by the Deputy Prime Minister when he came to visit with us on Monday, it was very, very welcome from the community. Finally, I'd just like to remind my constituents that I'll be in office on Friday morning at 8 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Golden Gates.
Families in Golden Gates who suffered the loss of their loved ones. But more specifically, Mr. Speaker, to the family of Miss Patrice Beadle, who passed away, to the family of Miss Marie Thompson, Mr. Speaker, and I believe Miss Marie Thompson is the mother of Shayna C., who used to be on ZNS. So I want to send condolences out to the family as well. I also want to send condolences out to the family of Miss Sarah Morris, and also to the family of Miss Joan Roach. I know Miss Melanie Roach personally. We worked together when she was the Director of Works. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to send condolences out to the family of Mr. Arthur Moxie, who is the brother of Mother Cynthia Pratt. He worked with us at the Consumer Affairs in Abaco, and he was transferred just last year. They've spoken with us, and he was transferred to Consumer Affairs here in New Providence. I spoke with Mother Pratt earlier today, and she is really having a difficult. She just had another death in the family, which we were trying to get over. And so I just wanted to send out condolences to her family as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for West, Grand Bahama, and Bimini.
Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues in offering my condolences and that of my constituency to the Roach family. I too have worked very closely with Melanie, and I know her sisters.
Honourable members.
And Mr. Speaker, so I do offer my sincere condolences to the Roach family. Mr. Speaker, also, I should like to offer my condolences to the family of a gentleman who I think the country knows. He lost his wife several weeks ago. Ansel Saunders of Bimini. 10 years ago, she became ill. He suffered from Alzheimer's. And Ansel Saunders, who had become renowned in the Progressive Liberal Party for his introductions of Celine Finlay, he is a gifted orator, a boat builder that is of no measure. In this country, nobody measures up to him. He's just significantly superior. He is a world record holder in bone fishing. And, Mr. Speaker, he has been one of the icons of Bimini for his entire life. Mr. Speaker, when his wife became ill, he sacrificed everything to be with her every day. He would go to his boat building facility and then return home. And he would turn down opportunities to attend events and travel because he would give her all that he could for the last 10 years of her life. And Mr. Speaker, he is certainly a gentleman and a true man, and he's so well respected. And when he laid his wife to rest, he's now on a campaign to teach others how to build boats. And the Gantine Group has been working with him. Resorts World has given him tremendous support, and he intends to pass on his skills and his ability to younger men and women of the Bimini community. And so, Mr. Speaker, for an icon like Ansel Saunders, it was certainly a very difficult moment for all of us. But being as strong as he is, he caused all of us to have a sense of relief and understanding and appreciation. But one thing for sure, Mr. Speaker, he gave his wife everything he could and was with her every day and provided her the leadership and understood completely what it means to be and to be married until death do us part. And Mr. Speaker, I do offer him my condolences and that of the people of Bimini and certainly of West Grand Bahama. And Mr. Speaker, also, there have been others who passed on during the time that we were on break, including Sarah Forbes, a stalwart counselor of the Progressive Liberal Party. She, again, one of the phenomenal Bahamian women who over the years, Mr. Speaker, gave so much to ensure that this party could grow. She was one of those persons who did whatever she had to do, coming from Exuma and entering the hotel industry and then business to ensure that at the end of the day her children would get opportunities. And Mr. Speaker, I remember many years ago, because she's been fighting with cancer for some almost 20 years, but there was a time when we thought that she would pass. And on the insistence of former Member of Parliament Pleasant Bridgewater, the Prime Minister went to Sarah Forbes' bedside in the hospital and conferred upon her stalwart consulship, the highest award in our Progressive Liberal Party. That's how much she meant to the party. And Mr. Speaker, upon her death, we were all there, including the Deputy Prime Minister. The Prime Minister was out of the country at the time. And of course, they spoke very highly of the Member of Parliament from Marco City, who represents her now and who she became so fond of. And so, Mr. Speaker, for all those persons who have passed on in my constituency, I certainly offer my condolences to the family. But those two families I wish to draw attention to, Mr. Speaker, because they are iconic and they represent all that we have fought for and all that we stand for and all that we believe in our continuing quest to make our country the greatest. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Mangrove Cree and South Andros.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It speaks to me being the senior man member for Fort Charlotte, but submit himself and allow me to stand as the member for Tall Pines has given me the leeway to be the senior man on this side and speak on behalf of those who haven't spoken yet. Mr. Speaker, I'm feeling good today. A few days ago, I had a chance to sit in the Church of God Cathedral and see my son marry and have my colleagues there. So today I stand as a man who speaks to life and hope and aspiration for the Bahamian people. And that's why when my government and my Prime Minister speaks so strongly about believing in Bahamian, my heart this afternoon is full. For those who are yet unborn, that we will continue to see brighter and better days in this beautiful Commonwealth. Mr. Speaker, also this afternoon, I can't help but also commiserate with the Reverend Marie Roach, who serves as the rector for the Anglican Diocese in Central Andros. And I've gotten to know her better in more recent months, and the work she continues to do there in the community, in that challenged community of Andros, the disenfranchised and also the indigent, and also those who are less fortunate. I want to say today to her and her family on passing of her mom that we are saddened, and we also note the sadness that it must bring to your family. But I also must note quickly, as we would have passed stem cells bill just moments ago, that only had this been done and the regulatory regime been set in place some time ago, maybe Zonica Wallace, Miss Joyce's daughter, would have been around. Miss Joyce, this afternoon, is still stricken with cancer, and so are 3 of her daughters, and one of them just lost her life to the battle of cancer just a few Saturdays ago, and our Prime Minister was there, along with other members of our governing party, to attend that funeral at St. Barnabas Church. So my heart is full this afternoon, as we too live in hope that we'll see progressive legislation passed in this place. Also, I want to say thanks to those who would have assisted with summer youth camps in the community of Andros, Central, Mangrove Key, and South Andros during these challenging times, and also to the Minister of Education, member for Marathon with the back-to-school repairs, which were much needed in our community. And also ask my government to look at it very closely, at having the extension of the national training agencies and also the urban renewal offices extended to the areas of Andros. Mr. Speaker, we have many challenges, and if you were to visit these communities now and see young people now standing in our local magistrate courts, this would border any good and right-thinking Bahamian to know that the family islands are not what they used to be, and that they too have their challenges and need assistance. So therefore, youth and extension officers also needed in our community to bring back the sound moral mores and traditional values, and also a real sense of probity into our communities in Andros and also by extension to the Bahamas. I want to thank publicly our island administrators and local government practitioners who continue to assist in the community of Andros, especially South Andros and Mangrove Key, and by extension Central Andros. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we anticipate bigger and brighter and better days. As a member of the golden generation, I too look forward to the day when I could sing like the member for Centerville. Forward always, retreating never, long live the great Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements? The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish in the brief moments that I have left to recognize Mr. Shannon Butler, recent graduate of Queens College High School, and also his parents, Mr. Peter and Mrs. Wendy Butler, constituents of Fort Charlotte, for his tremendous accomplishment in being named the most recent National Merit Scholar. He intends to become a cardiothoracic surgeon and leaves shortly to attend St. Andrews University in the United Kingdom. He is an example of a young man who's doing great things to counter the argument that young men are not doing enough in our society, and so he's a role model for our young people. I congratulate his family on the work they've done to nurture him, and on his parents, to his parents for nurturing such a fine young man. Also, sir, I wish to thank those who aided me in putting on a very successful summer camp in the constituency of Fort Charlotte. Mrs. Joanne Brown Hamilton, Mrs. Nicolette Archer, Mrs. Ariel Dames, Mr. Chris Dames, Mr. Barry Saunders, Miss Andrea Janor, Miss Donna Moxie, Miss Christine Humes, and Miss Tamika Bain. We had, most recently at the closing ceremony for our summer camp, a 4-week camp under the theme 40 Years of Nation Building. We had the keynote address given by the Primary School Student of the Year, young Miss Lauren Roll. Congratulations to also her parents on raising such a fine young lady who herself aspires to one day become a neurosurgeon. And she is a recent graduate of Xavier's Primary School and is going on to attend St. Augustine's College. Obviously, the Catholic school system, like the Methodists, are doing an excellent job. Her name, St. Thomas More, sorry, going to St. Augustine's College. Her name is Miss Lauren Roll. And finally, I wish to recognize the help of the Minister of Works in facilitating the relocation of the food vendor from the Papua Tract community that became the subject of a tremendous amount of conflict with the community residents in the Papua Tract area, facilitating his relocation to Iraqi along with the member for Bamboo Town, ensuring that while we eliminated the point of contention for the residents of that community, we did not deprive the individual of an opportunity to engage in commerce, especially taking into account these very difficult times. And finally, I'd like to thank the Minister of Education, the member for Marathon, in facilitating opportunities for the young people in my area. As many times as I would have had to interact with him, he's very responsive. I thank him. I also would like to thank the Minister for Youth, Sports and Culture, the member for Carmichael, who's done the same very recently. Because as a backbencher, there's oftentimes very little that we can do, and we rely heavily upon the assistance of our cabinet colleagues. And so it would really be remiss of me if I did not thank you all very much on behalf of my constituents for all that you do behind the scenes to support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. To wrap up member statements, the Chair recognizes the Right Honourable Member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Speaker, I'd wish to, on behalf of all colleagues present, to give our condolences to the wife of the Deputy Prime Minister for the passing of her mother, Mrs. Eugenia Austin, who was living with the Deputy Prime Minister at the time of her death. In fact, on Saturday, whilst the Deputy Prime Minister was in Cat Island, his wife came to pay a courtesy call on my wife and myself for our 39th wedding anniversary. And she was there saying that she wanted to stay with her mother and not go to Cat Island with the two kids and the Deputy Prime Minister for the regatta, because she wanted to be near her mother. And about 5 minutes after leaving my home, she called me back to say to me, I can't wake my mommy up. And she asked if I can get Dr. Gomez, and I called Dr. Gomez at home and asked him to go with me, because I knew the Deputy Prime Minister was in Cat Island. And we went to the house where she, an obviously very, very distraught child, was lying in the bed with her mother. I thought on this occasion, what we did at the time was we knew the deputy wasn't there, so I spoke to him in Cat Island and stayed there during the wee hours of the morning, trying to give some comfort to her while the process of the body being taken over by the undertaker, the ambulance people came, and so forth, and all of the certifications. And so it was quite an experience, and he was absent, and so I don't know the burial arrangements, but she has passed, and we give our condolences. I'd also like to join those who have given condolences to Joan Roach. Father Roach, as leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, it's important for me to speak to a man who would have come from Barbados, who would have become Trinidad, who would have become as much a Bahamian as any one of us, who blended so easily into the community and was a great contributor. But God graced him with the opportunity to live long enough to see his children, his daughters, become major contributors to the country as well. One a teacher, another one became the first female director of works, Melanie, an engineer, another one working for the Ministry of Finance, and I think one of them, I said teacher?
Priest.
And one works for the Ministry of Finance. Works for the Ministry of Finance. So all contributors to public life when you wish. Sarah Forbes, I didn't have the opportunity to go to her funeral. I was traveling away, and but she was a great person. Her son, his name was called to me. He's a cardiologist in Freeport, and one who was first retained by Okeanos until they moved on to Dr. Saratopoulos. But Sarah was a great contributor, a very meaningful personality in Grand Bahama, one who represented herself well in the hotel industry, and one who will be long remembered not only for her charm, beauty, and grace, but for her contribution to the Progressive Liberal Liberal Party at a time when that support was needed in Grand Bahama, and where leadership she provided was needed. Zonica Wallace, I was shocked to learn about this young woman, 41 years of age, when I was told that the Member of Parliament for South Andros and the Deputy Prime Minister had visited her at her home where she was visiting with her mom in South Andros, and that she had terminal cancer, was terminally ill. And I did not see her before, but the family graciously invited me to speak at our homegoing. But it's another example, sir, that we do not know when, we do not know how, and we should govern our lives in such a way and it's really up to each of us to do so with a clear understanding that we are only here for a season, and when young people passes, that is as much evidence as you would need as to know that your number could be called when you least expect it to. We had a wonderful day today, sir, with the WNBA player. I want to just be able to say that because we don't do enough to lift up our heroes, and I think the Minister of Tourism, Member of Parliament for West End and Brimley, has said on so many occasions, 3 bells became Michael Thompson, a #1 draft pick, and the Bahamas doesn't know it, and we never gave him honor for it, sufficiently so. Rick Fox, who became later a Laker player, but also who was a Tar Heel, which indicates that not only is she a good basketball player, but at North Carolina University, they also emphasize the education. So she would probably have the level of intelligence and education that befits being the first Bahamian and having that honor to represent herself as the first Bahamian and set a standard for all the other Bahamians that will pass over. So on this side, I join in the congratulations. And finally, sir, I really wanted to speak about Greg Burrows, the senator. I've just heard for so many years people talk about this man. And one day, when his wife was seriously ill, I went to visit him at the baseball park, and he gave me a little talk. And I wanted to encourage him to see himself as a candidate. He didn't see himself then because his wife had a very serious health challenge. But later on, as we approached the general elections, he called me and told me he was willing to run. And then he told me he would take a seat that anyone would not expect him to win. And the courage that he demonstrated, the fidelity that he demonstrated, was so powerful and overwhelming to me that I've spoken about it on so many occasions. And when, Mr. Speaker, you go into a place like Freedom Park, and you see a man who is there contributing to these children, and he's not being paid, and you wonder why he's doing it, what motivates a man to do so much for so many young people, sitting in the quietude of New Providence, and nobody paying attention, and no one putting him on a platform, and no one congratulating and lauding him. And, you know, it's a very special kind of person who does that. And I want to be able to ask colleagues, let me say, sir, that prime ministers are placed in a position from time to time when they see obvious talent, but the talent is in the Senate. And the question is, how does he contribute on a national basis to that? How do you expand that? And so the obvious answer is, you give him a job in the Ministry of Sports and tell him go and do it. And then the question comes of whether the protocol allows it to happen, whether the fact that he's been given the privilege of being a senator because of the things he accomplished should stop him from being able to further that contribution by going into the islands of the Bahamas and creating this level of discipline and endeavor for young people that will forever mark their life and lay a foundation upon which they could build. Yeah. And I'm bothered, okay, when I look and I see him and I know for whatever reason that proposition by me is not fulfilled. And so the question is, when? Now. That's what it should be. Now. And to not apologize for it, sir. Right? He earned being a senator. He happens to be a PLP appointed senator. But he's a decent man, a good man, one who is a model citizen of this country, one who sets an example for it. And I only know him in that limited capacity. I know his mother well, I know his brothers well, even his sisters.
But he is deserving of having the opportunity, and the country will be enriched by our giving him that opportunity, Minister of Sports, to allow him and enable him immediately to be brought in by the Ministry of Sports and paid for the job. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And then, sir, finally, Ansel Saunders. Ansel Saunders, sir, is the man who, history will have it, took Dr. Martin Luther King into the mangroves of Bimini, and who is the witness to Dr. Martin Luther King talking about the draft he was doing for the Nobel Peace Prize award that he got. And he was in the mangroves, and the story goes that Dr. King, looking at the pristine environment in Bimini, surrounded by the mangroves of Bimini, the fish, the birds, said, how could anyone doubt that there is a God? How can anyone doubt that there is a God when you are sitting in this God-created place of Bimini? And he's 82 years of age, a very articulate man. And when the Member of Parliament told me, and I have since confirmed, that Colin Howe of Genting went to his house and asked him how many boats he could build in a year. And he said 3. And they said, well, we now commission you to build 3 boats on the condition that you'll gather around you a number of young men who you could transfer the technology of boat building to. And the developer did that. And he agreed. And the story is such a wonderful story of someone in the twilight of his life who has the skill of building boats, being empowered by an investor not just to build a boat for them, but to build 3 boats so as to ensure that the skills he has can be imparted to those young men who will be chosen. And I'm going to ask the minister responsible for the training agency to ensure that the training agency becomes an integral part of that, so that we could really make sure that happens. And finally, sir, Mrs. Lottie Tynes. My mother was a nurse, and Mrs. Lottie Tynes' life is legendary, literally legendary, for her contribution to the Red Cross in this country, for her contribution to development and expansion of our humanity as a country, for Christian charity, symbolizing all of the things that are good and decent about our people and their willingness to give, their willingness to identify. And she was married to a man who was the godfather of either my wife or her sister, the father of Maurice Tynes, a friend of my father-in-law, and another Bahamian of note. And I want to recognize to all of us who've had mothers who have passed that father's exception, there's only one mother, only one. And to those of us who still have mothers who are alive, you know, treasure those mothers, because there's only one. And that when they do pass, you will forever remember them for the love and the encouragement and the stimulation and for the disposition of values to you. And it becomes so strong as you get older. And so I know what Maurice is going through, because he had that kind of mother. And you know, as we get older, we become more sentimental and appreciative of the life we've had. And it tells me that in our country, and this is why I'm so motivated in this term, that in our country there are children without mothers.
there are children without fathers. There are children who need the intervention of the state. And but for the intervention of the state, they will not have any kind of life and could become a menace to themselves and society. And that is why when we have the occasion like this to salute a woman like Lottie Dye, to salute a woman like Joan Roach, to salute a woman like Sarah Forbes, it is well done. And we say to them, well done, faithful servant. Do well, rest in peace.
Thank you, Right Honorable Member. Appointment of Select Committees. Member for Tall Pines, you recognize that we have completed member statements, and I'll allow you to have a brief statement.
I was just waiting on the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, out of deference to him.
Very well.
Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Tall Pines.
Thank you, sir. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest sympathy, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister on the passing of his mother-in-law and, of course, his lovely wife, their mother. Speaker, I would also like to express, on behalf of the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister responsible for BEC, as well as the Chairman, the Board, members of staff and management, our deepest sympathy in the untimely passing of Mr. James Says, Mr. Speaker. Around about 12 o'clock today, he was on the job working in the distribution department, where he fell out and never recovered. I want to express to his wife and his family our deepest and sincerest sympathy, Mr. Speaker, and also to thank him for the job that he has done on behalf of the corporation, by extension on behalf of the Bahamian people. Also, Mr. Speaker, also to the family of Aretta Rule, one of my dear constituents from my old constituency of Sunset Park, number 1, who was on pass recently, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of her family and indeed all the families that I had the privilege of representing. Speaker, also Mr. John Pinder, gentleman who passed last week from Jubilee Gardens. He had his funeral last week, Saturday, in Bimini. He's a Biminite, and the funeral was there. And also, Mr. Speaker, but by no means least, to express my deepest, deepest sympathy to the passing of the young man, his dear parents, who I met on Saturday, Mr. and Mrs. MacDonald. In fact, his father is a police officer. With the untimely death on Prince Charles Drive on Saturday, I was there trying to get BEC to get things together. And also to commend BEC for a job well done in having those lights restored in that area, Mr. Speaker. It was most unfortunate what happened to Mr. MacDonald on his way home. His mother was there sobbing. I was trying to console her. And the police had indicated that, in fact, her son was not the driver. He was the one that went to the hospital, only to learn later that, in fact, it was him who was lying on the ground dead. And I just would like to say again to her that Jesus never gives us more than we can bear, and to please read Job over and over and over again. May his soul rest in peace, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and thank all Honourable Members. Appointment of Select Committees, instruction to Select Committees, discharge of Select Committees, notices for future meetings. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, I would wish to renew all matters standing in the name of members of the government. In addition, I'd like to give notice that at the next sitting of the House, it is our intention to move the following resolution. Whereas by Section 4 of the Judges Remuneration and Pensions Act, Chapter 45, the Governor General shall, within 6 months of the coming into force of this section and thereafter, within 6 months after the first day of April in every third year, or at such earlier times as may be expedient, appoint a commission to A, inquire into the adequacy of the salaries, allowances, and pensions payable under this Act, and the adequacy of judges' benefits generally, and B, make such recommendations as the Commission considers appropriate in relation to the matters specified in paragraph 8. And whereas the Governor General appointed a commission for the period 3rd day of December 2012 to 3rd day of September 2012 to the 3rd day of December 2012, the Commission completed and submitted a report dated the 3rd day of December 2012 to the Prime Minister containing its recommendations. And whereas subsection 4 of Section 4 of the Act provides that where the Governor General is satisfied after consultation with the Commission that it is equitable that any recommendation contained in the report laid under subsection 3 should have retrospective effect in order to confer benefit upon or remove a disability attaching to any person, such recommendation may be given effect for that purpose. And whereas subsection 5 of section 4 of the Act provides that no recommendations under subsection 4 shall have retrospective effect unless it has received the prior approval of the House of Assembly signified by resolution. And whereas the Governor General proposed to make the orders in the form attached to increase the benefits of all judges, such orders to have effect from the first day of July 2013. Be it therefore resolved that this House approves the Governor General making the orders. Mr. Speaker, I will give notice of...
Very well. Order that the notice be brought up.
There's the 7th. August. You need this too? I need... Okay.
Order that the notice do lie on the table. Chair recognize honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
I wish also to indicate that it is our intention...
Your microphone is down.
Sorry. I wish also to indicate that it is our intention to take the summer break shortly. In order for us to do that, we intend to come back on Monday, the 12th of August, and we want to, at that time, we want to deal with this judge's remuneration resolution and any other urgent matters. And hopefully, thereafter, we'll be able to take the summer break.
Very well. Thank you very much, honorable member. A member seconded that. Adjournment. The chair recognizes honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
I think I move that the House should adjourn until Monday, the 12th of August at 10 a.m. in the morning.
It has been moved and seconded that the House that is rising adjourn to Monday, the 12th of August at 10 a.m. As many in favor will remain seated and those opposed will stand. Adjournment motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House does now adjourn, and I ask members of Parliament to congratulate themselves on the hard work that they did today.
It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn. As many in favor will stand.
All right.
Government finally getting that stem cell research and therapy debate over and done with, and the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Act nearly becoming law, certainly is passed now through the House of Assembly, must go into the Senate. Also passed today the National Training Agency bill. We noted several weeks ago that agency was actually opened by the Prime Minister down on Gladstone Road. Those two bills passed on what has been an eventful day here in Parliament. Of course, the member for Kalani, the leader of the opposition, named earlier for refusing to withdraw comments he made with respect to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, of course, speaking to that today as he wrapped up debate here on stem cell research and therapy, asking the question, what man of man who, after having done and been involved in the process of allowing a facility to be given a license in Grand Bahama to begin the process of engaging in stem cell research and therapy, what man of man would now come to the House and say the kinds of things that the member said about him being the Prime Minister? Again, also today the Prime Minister, as he wrapped up the debate, paying special respects to the member for South Abaco, Edison Key. He's a member of the Free National Movement. All of the members of the Free National Movement, with the exception of Mr. Key, the member for South Abaco, walked out of the House today. Mr. Key, the only member of the Free National Movement to be in the House, and of course, all of those members in the House, Progressive Liberal Party, the government, of course, and Mr. Key voting for that stem cell research bill. Of course, Mr. Key also, in his presentation, bringing an avocado tree to the House and talking about the process that he used in splicing to get that tree and associating it with the stem cell process and speaking to the value of stem cell research. The Okeanos Institute, according to Prime Minister Christie, communicating to the Minister of Health today the fact that the Australian Parliament has recently passed and made legitimate the procedure that that operation would like to use if they are eventually given the approvals to go ahead. Talking about approvals, the Prime Minister also saying that by the end of this month there will be a formal arrangement between the University of Miami and the Bahamas government for future explorations with respect and oversight with respect to stem cell research. In fact, the University of Miami presently doing research on some 7 diseases, and whatever happens, the intention is to establish a lab here in the Bahamas. The University of Miami will provide the stem cells that will be used in order to make sure that there is the highest integrity of all of the operations and everything that goes on here in the Bahamas. Dr. Conwell Brown and his partner, Dr. Stack, whose pedigree is above reproach, way beyond reproach, former dean at Duke University. According to the Prime Minister, Dr. Brown's proposal, an application to the government is the most complete that they've received to date. And of course, saying that the owner of Albany has committed to creating and building a wellness center there on some property that had originally, according to Mr. Christie, been promised to the government to be made available for lots to be sold to young Bahamians. But anyway, the owner of Albany has promised to place a wellness center there. There's also a commitment to place a wellness center on Bimini. And of course, there's the application from the Freeport people. So could be quite a number of wellness centers, and some of them obviously dedicated to stem cell research. The end of the year, the end of the month for the arrangement with the University of Miami for stem cell. By the end of the year, Prime Minister also announcing that there will be a new regime with respect to the distribution of electricity, and I'm sure we will hear a lot more about that in the coming months. Monday, members of the House will return for their final meeting, going to deal with judges' remuneration and a couple other incidentals that, again, we will hear about on Monday. But Monday, members will return, and then they will take the break for the summer. And again, eventful day here in Parliament. The Member of Parliament for Kalani named and suspended from the House for 2 meetings, the next 2 meetings. His members, with the exception of the member for South Abaco, all walking out with him, so they won't be here on Monday for that final meeting before the summer break. Again, that's it from here at the House of Assembly. On behalf of the team here, I'm Anthony Newbold. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your weekend.